This is the fourth installment of a chilling true crime tale we began unraveling a few weeks ago. It explores a case within the murky depths of family dynamics, where love and desperation collide. A sinister plot unfolds, one that transcends the realms of divorce and custody battles. Today's case at hand is not a typical saga of a marriage gone bad, but rather a harrowing narrative of evil plans, resorting to the unthinkable in a quest for the ultimate control.
Join us as we unravel the fourth layer of this tragic crime and dive into the depths of the human mind and the chilling motivations that drive individuals to commit unthinkable acts in the name of control and possession.
Hi everyone, welcome to episode 9. Today is part 4 of a case that we began to explore a few weeks ago here on the Darklivity podcast. I'm your host, Kimberlea, and I'm here with my co-host, my boyfriend, Jonathan.
Hi.
By the way, I'm going to do my best to not rock my chair back and forth. It's just so hard not to, but I've noticed and I've heard you, so I'm going to try to do my best. You've been doing it too.
It's nice. You know what else is nice? That you're here watching us. But if you haven't subscribed, don't forget to do that and ring that notification bell so you don't miss out on what we have next. And we hope that you've watched the last previous episodes of this saga. If you haven't, then we highly recommend you stop and go back and watch them. We'll put it in the cards and the link in the description. We firmly stress that you not watch this episode without knowing the entire backstory of the lives of the people we will be diving deeper into today.
You know, we really didn't think we were going to enjoy doing more than one part, but it's actually like a TV show with a new episode in the same case every week. And a lot of you have expressed liking the deep dive specifically into this case. There's just so much to dive into. So when we left off in part 3, we told you about the green Prius and the cell tower dump at Premier Gym being connected to 2 men from the Miami area, Luis Rivera and Sigfredo Garcia. They were both listed on the rental car agreement, and a light green Prius was seen leaving Dan's house after the shooting, and Sigfredo's phone pinged at the gym on the day of Dan's murder. So who are these people and why would they want Dan Markel dead? That's what investigators want to know. But we also want to quickly point out that even though we are telling you all of these details very quickly, it takes months, sometimes in this case even years, to gather all the evidence and make these connections. A lot was going on in the weeks following Dan's murder, and not much was being publicized by officials about who could have killed Dan back in the summer of 2014 when all of this was unfolding. As a matter of fact, there were different theories and speculation at the time, and that is what the media was focusing on. The Daily Mail even did a write-up about 2 weeks after the murder, and it was entitled, quote, "Baffling Murder of the Harvard Law Scholar Professor Killed in Hit Was Targeted 2 days After Writing Impassioned Essay on the Death Penalty and Getting a New Girlfriend," end quote. And of course, guess what picture of Wendi was used? Yes, the one of her in the purple cleavage-bearing top that her ex-boyfriend at this point, Jeff, claimed could have been posted as her new profile picture just the night before the murder on purpose, suggesting that Wendi knew that this case would be all over the media because she had confided in Jeff a while back that her brother Charlie may be looking into all options when it came to dealing with Dan, including having someone take care of him, i.e., kill him.
Well, we don't know if Wendi changed her profile picture on purpose because she knew Dan was going to die or because of her recent breakup with Jeff that same week. Maybe it was to make Jeff jealous. But as Jeff suggested, that picture was making its rounds all over the news and media outlets like this one in the Daily Mail. The article begins with just 36 hours before he met his killer. 41-year-old Markel's thoughts were firmly fixed on the most passionate cause, the death penalty, posting an essay on the subject to his legal blog, questioning the acceptable rate of errors in death penalty cases. Markel's piece was posted to his widely read Prof's blog on the evening of July 16th. It's true that Dan opposed the death penalty and worked on criminal defense teams as a consultant in various cases. Actually, there was one of those cases that the media speculated could have something to do with his murder. One of those floating theories was regarding Dan representing Rabbi Martin Woolmark, an Orthodox rabbi who was in a legal battle with 9 other rabbis out in New Jersey. It was an extortion case involving several Orthodox rabbis who were accused of kidnapping and beating Jewish men who refused to grant their wives what's called a get. It's a Jewish religious divorce document. Even though the women in these cases were already granted a civil divorce, still apparently the husbands refused to go any further. Without a get, Orthodox women are prohibited from being able to get remarried after divorce. Most husbands willingly sign the document, but some refuse out of spite or to get money from their wives or extorting their families. A lawyer for the rabbi said Markel was not hired as a lawyer in the rabbi's case. Instead, he had been hired as an expert on conspiracy law. Some speculated Dan was targeted for his work on this case. But anyways, Dan's involvement was ultimately ruled out as a reason for his murder.
But Dan was also being threatened online before his murder. There were a number of comments on posts that Dan created on various blogs where some people didn't agree with him and went so far as to say things like, quote, "All means necessary are important to shutting people like you down," end quote. And Dan expressed his concern for his safety after reading posts like this. And when he did, it brought more comments like one that said, quote, "You're worried about your home and private life being a target? What about your graduates' homes and private lives, or lack thereof? You've ruined their lives, you fool." End quote. Dan was accused of stifling discussions on the Prof's blog by deleting comments, and one person said, quote, "To put it charitably, folks who have never met you are inclined to see you as an obsessive, egomaniacal control freak," end quote. Among other names that people called him, like a douchebag, for example. And there were some pretty angry posts telling Dan to F off and that he was a piece of crap. But they used a much more flagrant word. I'm not really sure how Dan was ruining lives, as one commenter wrote, but his views and actions were referred to in one post saying, quote, "He desperately attempts to silence dissent and purge those whose comments disagree with his elitist and privileged worldview." Prof's blog is purportedly dedicated to intellectual honesty, but Markel doesn't support intellectual honesty. He's the epitome of the legal one percenters, endemic to legal academia. He tries to play the imperious professor role with non-academics by attempting to silence them. Little does he realize how pathetic, shallow, and mean-spirited this behavior makes him look. Earth to Dan, you mean nothing to the legal practitioners or those of us in the real world. You are a paper tiger, end quote. I didn't know what a paper tiger meant.
Oh, it's like a paper tiger in appearance is very powerful, but in reality, this means that you have nothing to be afraid of. I think it comes from like a Chinese saying.
So it's more like, his bark is worse than his bite kind of thing? Okay, I get it. So some people didn't like Dan, but was it enough to have him killed? Well, every lead had to be looked into. At this point, they still hadn't put together the link between the Prius and the two men in Miami. That would come much later, even though we already told you how that connection existed. Plus, when building a case that will stick, they need much more than a mere connection. They need solid evidence and enough of it to convince a jury.
There was something else going on in Tallahassee at the time. The city commissioner, Scott Maddox, asked for an audit of the Consolidated Dispatch Agency to be carried out following the delayed response of EMTs to Dan's house. The dispatch agency was in charge of routing 911 calls, including the one to James Geiger, made about Dan on July 18th.
Getting sent an ambulance in a hurry. He's still alive. He's moving. Okay.
An investigation was done to find out why there were errors in communication that morning. They did find a software problem, but it was mostly human error. And the dispatcher ended up being removed from that position and was no longer taking 911 calls. The agency was also using the 911 call for training other dispatchers. We talked about this in the last video, but even if emergency personnel would have arrived on the scene sooner, Dan would have still died from his injuries. So as far as making it a big difference in Dan's case specifically, it wouldn't have. But it would make a difference going forward, so it's important for this agency to point out any issues in regards to the system or the dispatcher, so it doesn't happen again. However, Dan's parents were advised by legal counsel that as Dan's next of kin, they had a duty to sue the agency on Ben and Lincoln's behalf, which they did, and it took a year, but the lawsuit was settled at $40,000, and it was put into trust for Dan's sons.
Speaking of money, we told you last time that Dan's mother explained that detectives were following the money from the beginning. They searched for Dan's will, but they never found one. However, in Ruth's book, she explained that when Wendi and Dan were going through marriage counseling before the divorce, Dan had taken out a large life insurance policy of $2 million, and Wendi was the beneficiary at the time, and she knew she was. And in the days following Dan's murder, Wendi was already calling the insurance companies wanting information about the policy, specifically who the beneficiary was. However, after the divorce, Dan changed the policy, as well as his pension and all investments to make sure his sons were the sole and equal beneficiaries. The Markels had to hire an attorney to make sure Dan's finances were safe. Remember Dan's friend Tamara? Well, she set up a GoFundMe for Dan's boys, and the donations were intended to go into a trust for Ben and Lincoln. However, Ruth explained that Wendi actually tried to claim the funds as hers because she was Dan's widow, and she tried to gain access to the money, which added a lot of stress and drama to the entire situation. In addition, Wendi requested what's called upkeep funds from the boys' trust for expenses like rent and food. And she was already receiving $2,400 a month for each child from the government from their Social Security because of Dan's death. And I don't know how I feel about that because Wendi was educated and employed. So why would she need rent and food money in addition to like a $4,000 that she was receiving from the government? And she was even entitled to Dan's home on Trescott. But Ruth said, like an omen, a tree fell on the roof, causing major damage a couple months after Dan's murder. Oh, there's that tree that she was saying always fell on Trescott.
Oh my God. And I tried to drive up Trescott and I saw that it was blocked. And I just thought, oh, there's maybe some trees down or something.
But to be serious, there was a lot of tension between Wendi and Dan's family, especially in regard to money. But Ruth didn't want that to come between her and her grandchildren. So she did what she could to remain on good terms with Wendi. Eventually, 3 months after Dan's murder, Ruth took a trip to Florida for her 70th birthday, and Wendi agreed to meet her at a butterfly conservatory in South Florida so that she could see the boys. Instead of coming alone, Ruth noticed that Wendi brought both of her parents with her. And Ruth remembered that she had not been alone with Wendi to just talk and grieve together since Dan's murder. Wendi was always with her parents, and they were just hovering over the boys and Ruth. She couldn't even be alone with her own grandsons.
And at one point during this visit, Donna even came up to Ruth and said, "Who would have done such a thing in broad daylight?" referring to Dan's killing. Well, Ruth was already sad visiting the boys who reminded her so much of Dan. She didn't even want to think about the murder, but Donna just had to bring that up. That hurt Ruth. She really wanted a moment alone with Wendi, especially since Wendi had not even come to Dan's funeral with the boys. Granted, it was in Canada, but at the very least, Ruth was hoping they'd fly in for what's called the Unveiling, which is actually the name of Ruth's book. But an unveiling in the Jewish tradition is a religious ceremony that takes place at the grave of a loved one. It marks the formal dedication of a tombstone or grave marker and the final resting place of the deceased. It's to honor their life. You know those rocks we see on top of the tombstone? Those are visitation stones, and they're significant in Jewish bereavement practices. It's been said that those stones keep the soul of the deceased in this world.
I never knew that, but I did see them.
Ruth felt so uncomfortable because when she even attempted to get beside Wendi alone, Harvey or Donna would be standing inches away eavesdropping. Ruth said she named her book The Unveiling for several reasons. The unveiling of Dan's grave would be the hardest part for her since his murder. That tombstone would signify that Dan was gone forever. But also because she wanted to unveil the true story behind the headlines, to show what life is like for the victims left behind, which are the families of the ones who are murdered. Their lives are changed forever. Dan's unveiling was planned for the following year in April of 2015. After numerous drafts, they decided on what would be inscribed on Dan's tombstone. It reads, quote, "In loving memory of Daniel Eric Markel, beloved father, son, brother, and friend, October 9th, 1972, July 19th, 2014. His children were his world, his family, friends, and community, his pillars. His academic work, his passion. His light shone so bright that it will never be extinguished."
Before we tell you what happened at Dan's unveiling, let's go back to the investigation. It would take a long time, as we said, for all the connections to the men in Miami to be made. It's not like the movies or TV shows. A lot of work, technology, and investigation went into Dan's case. In the days after Dan's murder, his neighborhood was being canvassed. The investigators were asking anyone in the area if they noticed anything unusual in the days leading up to July 18th. and one neighbor that lived at the Ashford Club Apartments, located right behind Dan's house, had some very interesting information to share. The neighbor said she saw something odd around mid-morning on Thursday, July 17th, so the day before Dan's murder. She said a light-colored Prius came into the parking lot and parked in the southeast corner. Then two men emerged from the car and proceeded to go near a drainage ditch that was located right behind Dan Markel's residence. She described one of the men as having a lighter complexion. He was tall and athletic and wearing a baseball cap. The other man was short and stocky with a darker complexion, possibly Hispanic, with short, dark hair. She couldn't see where they went, but about 10 minutes later, she saw them reappear. The shorter one was soaking wet, and he was carrying something black in one of his hands. The taller one was wet up to about his knees. It appeared as though these two men had gone across the storm drainage ditch and possibly over the fence into Dan's backyard. It stands to reason, if these were the same two men in the Prius on the bus footage, they were staking out Dan's house, gaining insight on where the doors were and his routine, and who knows how long they'd been watching him.
Even though this was valuable information, Detective Isom was focusing on motive. And there was one thing that was brought up no matter who he interviewed: Wendi and Dan's divorce. Wendi was the current running through every explanation who may have benefited from Dan being dead. Isom requested all their divorce filings and sifted through the hundreds upon hundreds of pages, trying to make sense of it all. One thing was for sure, it was ugly. Isom believed from the beginning that looking into those closest to Dan would be the key to solving his murder. This is why he interviewed Wendi for 5 hours. A number of people who knew Wendi mentioned her brother Charlie as being capable of hiring someone to kill Dan. So Isom sent FBI agents out to New York to interview Wendi's other brother, Rob, to attempt to gain some insight into Charlie. You probably already know this if you've been following that Rob Adelson is not that close with his family, and that's exactly what he told investigators. However, he knew how much Charlie hated Dan, and that he had the resources to hire a hitman. Rob described Charlie as being cold. This made Isom look deeper into the Adelson family, including those emails between Donna, Harvey, and Wendi. Remember those from part 1? Isom started to become convinced that the men in the Prius were hired by someone close to Wendi. But who? It seemed Harvey, Donna, and Charlie hated Dan, so were they all involved? If so, how could Isom prove it? It's one thing to speculate, it's another to have solid proof.
This led detectives to acquire evidence from things like Wendi's computers and all of her family's cell phone records so they could find a connection. And one thing I had to mention, and it's not necessarily related to them finding a connection between the hitmen and the Adelson family, but Wendi was pretty obsessed with Googling Dan's new girlfriend, Amy Adler. She tried looking up a bunch of information about Amy, her ex-husband, and even her brother. But what I thought was particularly interesting was that during this investigation of her computer records, they found that she was looking up, how do we say this?
Yeah, she was on corn sites.
Adult websites specifically related to teachers doing the naughty with their students.
Bumping uglies.
Oh my goodness, Wendi. But it was when investigators sifted through all the phone numbers from the cell tower dump near the locations where Dan was that day and went through records from 4 different carriers that they finally got a hit. There was one number that both pinged at the gym on July 18th, the day of Dan's murder, at 9:36 a.m. and was present in one of the Adelsons' call logs on July 1st, just 17 days before. That same 786 number that we told you about in the last video, and it belonged to Sigfredo Garcia, the same guy listed on the rental agreement for the Prius. That number called Harvey Adelson's cell phone. Well, they pulled up all of Sigfredo's information, including his driver's license picture, and they saw that he had a light complexion, light eyes, dark hair, and was 5'11". He matched the description of one of the men inside the Prius on the day of Dan's murder, and also one of the men that the neighbor from the apartment buildings behind Dan's house had described.
At this point, detectives looked through Sigfredo Garcia's cell phone records trying to figure out if there were any phone numbers he frequently contacted and whose phone also pinged in the area Dan frequented on the day of his murder. And sure enough, they find another Miami number. It's got a 305 area code, and when they looked into it, guess who phone it belonged to? None other than Luis Rivera. We've already heard his name because he was the other person on the Prius rental agreement. And when they looked into his DMV records, it showed he was only 5'4" and he had a darker complexion. So he and Sigfredo Garcia were now in the crosshairs of investigators as the two men responsible for killing Dan Markel. Now that they had the phone records, they could look up the GPS. And the Prius itself was equipped with GPS, installed by the owners of the rental agency to assist with theft or non-returns. The company that provided the GPS system is called Spirion, so the investigators contacted them to provide the Prius location records. It's important for the investigators to create a timeline of Sigfredo and Luis's whereabouts before, during, and after the commission of the crime to build their case. On the morning before the murder, Luis and Sigfredo's phones were both pinging from a cell phone tower near Roadway Inn on North Monroe Avenue in Tallahassee. And Sigfredo's pinged there on the morning of July 18th. The rental agreement for the Prius indicated it was rented on July 15th, 3 days before the murder. Then detectives pulled both the men's bank records and found a transaction at a Chase Bank ATM in Pembroke Pines, located in South Florida, on July 18th at 6:46 p.m. It was a $40 withdrawal, so they contacted the location to pull surveillance, and sure enough, they got a clear shot of both suspects inside the green Prius. Luis is the one driving, wearing the black shirt, and the person in the white shirt, the one we saw in the bus footage, was Sigfredo in the passenger seat.
I know it seems like this alone would be enough to link these men to the crime, but as we stated, these things take time, and there was still a lot to be uncovered. First, it was important to know all about both Luis and Sigfredo. Upon a deeper investigation, the detectives found out that Luis, who went by the nickname Tato, was not only a member of the Latin Kings, but he was also one of the leaders in his region. It's one of the largest street gangs in the U.S., mainly dealing drugs like coke, heroin, and weed, but they're also linked to violent crime. Luis became a Latin King member when he was only 10 years old, and by 13, he had already been arrested for the first time. It wasn't anything deadly, though it did involve a gun, a BB gun. He shot a kid in the head with one. Since he was a minor, he was sentenced at the juvenile level, but once he was initiated into the Latin Kings, it became his life. School wasn't necessary. It was all about the brotherhood. Luis didn't even go past a 3rd grade reading level, even though he did stay in school and went on to high school. But he started doing drugs before he was even a teenager. He was more interested in ranking high in the Latin Kings than graduated from high school. He not only did drugs, but sold them as well, which led to his first big boy arrest when he was in 10th grade. And then he was subsequently expelled and spent time in and out of jail. But he was rising up in the Latin Kings. He ended up becoming a dad when he was only 17. Him and his girlfriend at the time, Annie Diaz, had their first daughter together, Caritza. And when he was 19, they had another daughter together, Keishla. His family came first, in addition to his gang family. Luis, though a criminal, was first and foremost a father, and he took that role very seriously. Family meant a lot to him. He even learned a trade, masonry, and held down a full-time job to help support his family. He worked at a company called Coastal Masonry for over 15 years, and he was surprisingly very responsible when it came to his finances, including having things like a 401k, health insurance, and the like. But once a criminal, probably always one right, because Luis was still a Latin King, and he was in and out of jail on domestic charges, as well as battery against a law enforcement officer, and others related to illegal drugs and weapons possession.
By the year Dan was killed, Luis was no longer with his ex Annie. Instead, he was living with his girlfriend at the time, Jessica Rodriguez, who he met in 2010 after she got out of prison on a robbery charge. Jessica was on probation, and even though she knew all about Luis's drug dealing and other criminal behavior, she did not allow it at her house or around her. So much so, Luis had to hide everything he was doing. If Jessica were to find anything, she would probably report him, because she didn't want to go back to prison. Therefore, Luis made sure to go to a friend's house or his younger sister, Maria's, to conduct business. One of his best friends, who he considered a brother, was none other than his partner in crime, Sigfredo Garcia, who he met back when they were both in elementary school. They are both Latino, and they lived in the same neighborhood. Like Luis, with his nickname Tato, Sigfredo was also given a nickname, Tudo. We wondered where these names came from, and we found out that in Spanish, Tato means tattoo. And if this is why Lewis had that nickname, it made perfect sense. He was heavily tattooed, mostly with gang symbols like the crown representing the Latin kings, as well as his kids' names on his body.
We couldn't figure out what tudo meant. We did look it up, and I saw some that said maybe it was tutor.
Yeah, or teacher. And people in Chile use it to say tired.
Let us know if you have an idea of why this might be his nickname. I'm curious.
Sigfredo was not part of the Latin kings, but he grew up close to crime. His father had been in prison several times, and he was also a drug addict, cocaine in particular. He would even do this around his kids. Sigfredo tried it for the first time when he was only 10 years old.
And that was crazy to me, just like letting that be around children.
Yeah, and his dad also influenced other things, like committing crimes. He taught Sigfredo how to break into vehicles, amongst other things. However, his influence over Sigfredo came to an end when he left America, and he fled to Mexico, when Sigfredo was only 11 years old. But just like Lewis, Sigfredo was in trouble a lot as a kid. And at 6 years old, he was already introduced to the legal system, and by 12, he was arrested for arson. He and Lewis hung out, did drugs, and sold drugs together during their high school years. They were inseparable. Sigfredo was part of a Latin syndicate gang in Miami, so they both had gang ties.
Yeah, and apparently he used his looks to get his way, especially with the ladies. He has light eyes and dark hair, and well, this was a little less common for Hispanic guys, so he got the attention of the ladies. But there was one who he fell deeply in love with at 21 years old. He met an 18-year-old named Catherine Diana McBanoa. She was actually from the Philippines, but she grew up in the same neighborhood as Lewis and Sigfredo. So they began dating in 2003. They made a really attractive pair, with Catherine, who went by Katie, having long dark hair, brown eyes, and olive skin. She was the opposite of Sigfredo. She never got in trouble. She didn't even have a traffic ticket. They say that opposites attract. Sometimes it's true. Girls have a habit of going after the bad boys, kind of like you and I. I'm the bad one. Katie was going to college at Miami-Dade Community College until 2005 when she transferred up to Orlando to attend the University of Central Florida, and Sigfredo stayed back in Miami. She had had enough of his instability and criminal behavior. But eventually, Sigfredo ended up moving to Orlando that same year and living with Katie again after he had a run-in with some bad guys and got shot up and didn't even expect to make it. Katie was, of course, beside herself, and she helped Sigfredo recover her place, and eventually the couple got back together. And then Katie found out she was pregnant with their first child, a boy named Ethan, during her senior year in December of 2006. Sigfredo then followed in his best friend Lewis's footsteps and became a mason, and also got a job in masonry to support his family. Then, after Katie graduated in 2007, the couple and their young son moved back to Miami, and Sigfredo actually got a job with the same company that Lewis was working for.
But unlike Lewis, Sigfredo couldn't keep the job. Lewis was the one who fired him for drinking at work. They had to handle heavy machinery, and it was a dangerous combination. Eventually, unable to hold down a job, Sigfredo got more and more involved in drug dealing, and over time, this didn't sit right with Katie. Their relationship became a rocky one. They would break up, get back together, break up again. He never got physical with Katie. They'd argue, but he was so in love with her, he'd never hurt her. In fact, all he wanted to do was be with Katie, but he couldn't trade in his criminal life, drugs, and cheating to be good enough for her standards. Things change as you get older, and Katie wanted stability. Especially because now they had 2 children. In 2012, Katie and Sigfredo had a daughter together named Kaylee. Sigfredo, like Lewis, considered himself a dad before anything else and took his role very seriously. He was a present father, always there for his kids no matter what. He didn't want to be like his own father, so he went out of his way to be a good dad. But that didn't mean he didn't continue to have his run-ins with the law, and by 2013, he was unemployed and abusing drugs and alcohol regularly. But it was actually the cheating that broke him and Katie up the last time, and this time she was serious.
Yeah, and the way it went down was actually kind of funny, and I don't mean that the cheating was funny, but his phone accidentally dialed her. It was like she was the last call when he was butt dialing her, and she was listening in because she already had her suspicions, and she'd had it up to there with him, and she hears him talking about other girls that he's been having sex with. He's telling his friend about all these other women. And they're supposed to be together. So even though they're not married, they called each other husband and wife. They had been together so long, like over a decade at this point, and she had had it. She was the one with a steady job and she was taking care of all their finances. And he was out doing drugs, getting in trouble, and cheating. So she kicked him out of the house and she physically took all of his belongings and threw them outside. But of course, this man was in love with her. Even though he's doing all these things, he wishes that he could do the right thing and get her back. But this time, it was a major breakup, and he did have to move out and get his own place because at this point, Katie was not interested in entertaining all the challenges they faced. She was doing really well in her career. She was a receptionist at Sophie Dental and Orthodontics in South Beach. She got a degree in health services administration at the University of Central Florida, and then she had many jobs over the years. She worked at nightclubs, but then she got more serious and into her career and was working at dermatology offices, a realty company, and finally now a dental practice. She was always surrounded by successful people that were her superiors and her bosses and whatnot, and she wanted a better life for herself and her children. So now you have a basic understanding about who both Sigfredo and Louis are, and now they're both being accused of killing Dan Markel, but neither one of them would be arrested until May of 2016. A lot transpired between Dan's murder and the first arrest in this case.
That's right, and we briefly told you about what happened in the fall of 2015 when Wendi informed Ruth via email that she changed the boy's last name from Markel to Adelson. Well, what we didn't tell you was that Ruth had been doing her best to bite her tongue and get along with Wendi despite all the things she was doing that hurt Ruth and her family. Right before this email, Ruth had made plans to come to Miami to see the boys. Wendi knew Ruth would learn about the name change because they started a new school that fall, and they were going to have all kinds of drawings and schoolwork with their last names, and she wanted to tell Ruth before she saw it herself, which didn't make it any more of a surprise. Ruth said surprises were the only constant in her life at that time. What was more surprising than Wendi changing their last names was that she removed Benjamin's middle name. That name had important meaning to Dan, and Ruth could not wrap her brain around why Wendi would want to do that. Unless it was just to hurt Dan, because she claimed the last names were changed for safety reasons, but the middle name had nothing to do with being safe, so that doesn't make any sense.
I might be wrong, but my impression of why she might have wanted to change that name in particular was almost to, I'm saying Americanize, but to take away the Jewish name. I'm only speculating, but from what we've heard from both Donna and Wendi, they're Jewish, but they don't actually practice. So maybe living the Miami lifestyle and living the way that Wendi and her family did, they just wanted to remove that as another way to remove the Jewish tradition and Jewish roots that Dan was so adamant about setting for his boys. But I want to shift gears because this episode is going to highlight something very interesting that occurred in the time frame we just mentioned between Dan's murder and the first arrest in this case. In the spring of 2015, almost a year after Dan's murder, Wendi, who is living back in Miami, is in a writing class, part of which has a podcast component to it, which is called the Writing Class Radio, hosted by two writers who are also writing teachers, Andrea and Allison, who interview their students like Wendi on the podcast that they created in 2015, with the intention of, according to the podcast website, helping listeners get inspired by hearing other people tell their stories and learn how to write stories of their own. Wendi was in their writing class and subsequently interviewed about a story that she wrote in response to a prompt that was given to her in class. The prompt was, "How are you really?" In the podcast released a few months after she wrote this story in class, Wendi rereads the story to the podcast audience. Wendi chose to write about Dan's murder. We felt it was so important to highlight some of the things that Wendi said, and you will get to hear it for yourself in her own words and voice. We're going to play parts for you, but we're also going to stop along the way because we have to point out the red flags, the inconsistencies, and overall issues with a lot of the things that she said. And of course, we know you're going to have your own opinions, so please don't hesitate to express them in the comment section. Here goes.
On July 18th, 2014, someone shot my ex-husband in the head while he was pulling into our garage after he dropped our then 3- and 4-year-old sons off at school. I only found out this information when the police picked me up from a lunch date I was having with 2 girlfriends and insisted that I come with them back to the station and then interrogated me for 8 straight hours, because it's usually the ex-wife.
Wait, so I don't remember Wendy's interview, and it wasn't an interrogation, by the way. I don't remember it being 8 straight hours. We have the video in its entirety, and it started at approximately 2:45 p.m. and it ended just before 8 p.m. And it wasn't without many breaks. She even got to hug her friend while she was in the room. She acts like she was being held captive. She was actually a witness, someone who Isom thought would know Dan the best, someone that they hoped would help them solve his murder. She was the only one pointing fingers at herself a number of times, calling herself a suspect when no one else did. The interview was about 5 hours long, not 8, but we already know that Jeff Lacoste says Wendi is a liar. An exaggeration is a form of lying. She also states that the reason for this interrogation is because it's usually the wife. But according to who? Because is it though? Women are statistically more likely to be killed by their husbands or partners. I've done a lot of true crime stories, and I mean, sometimes it's a woman, but it's rarely the wife. It's usually the husband. Granted, when comparing the two in a study that's very outdated from the 90s, for every 100 husbands that have killed their wives, 75 wives killed their husbands. But as Wendy's story goes, it's usually the wife. Within the first couple minutes of this podcast, she's already exaggerated and incorrectly stated statistics to fit her own narrative. I actually had a podcast before my YouTube channel, and I always used to say it's the lover, the brother, the mother, or the significant other, and I think one or more of those may apply here.
The way she's reading it gives me the impression of almost like finding catharsis, like as if she's happy to be a part of this story.
Yeah, it's like her story now. Yep. I felt the same way, so let's get back into it.
I'm not really okay. I list the things that are going well when people ask this question. My children are thriving and happy. We live with my parents who are incredibly devoted to our well-being. I started my own immigration practice, and I just signed up to do a 1-year clerkship with the Federal 11th Circuit in September, which means I can get off Obamacare and have 1 year guaranteed of a steady income. But the truth is that I miss my life.
She's not okay? It appears that Wendi always manages to make everything about herself, even in the wake of Dan's murder. She doesn't hesitate to list all the positive aspects of her life, her accomplishments, her devoted mother and family, yet amidst all this, she's missing her life?
The one that's still going on.
Right, while Dan's gone. What about him? What about his family? What about his devoted mother? As Wendi is about to discuss all these things she's lost, let's see if she mentions Dan.
I was a professor at Florida State University College of Law. I was so proud to be a public interest attorney and a mentor to my students. The novel I wrote about my clients' stories had just been chosen as the common read for all first-year students at FSU. In August, I was supposed to be the commencement speaker, and then I was supposed to take my brain cancer surviving just turned 70 father on a trip to Machu Picchu. And I don't get to complain that I didn't do any of those things because I am alive.
There is so much wrong with this. First of all, in the novel she wrote about her client stories, where she injected her own story into the entire book. Yeah, you know, her foreshadowing the divorce, her leaving with the kids, even changing their names. That book was chosen as the mandatory first-year book for incoming law students at FSU. And if you're scratching your head, wondering why you were not alone. And she missed out on being the commencement speaker because Dan died. But what's more concerning is the next part, where she claimed that she was about to take her brain cancer surviving father on a trip. But Dan got murdered, so I guess it was postponed or it never happened. But Harvey never had brain cancer. He had what is called a benign acoustic neuroma. It's a non-cancerous lesion. It's a brain tumor, but it doesn't spread to other parts of your body. And according to what I read, it can be treated easily and quickly. And Harvey had this back in 2005. That's almost a decade before Dan was murdered. So why is Wendi bringing it up? Because Wendi wants sympathy. If I didn't know it, I would think that she's suffering from factitious disorder imposed on another, which used to be called Munchausen's by proxy, by the way that she talks about her boys having no father, getting all the attention that she did at Dan's memorial. She has this ex-husband who's now been murdered. All these things seem to be happening to her, not because of her. Had Dan never met Wendi, he wouldn't be dead. Yet in the end, she says that she doesn't get to complain because she's still alive. But isn't that what she just did? Like almost blaming Dan's murder for her life being turned upside down. Yet Wendi got exactly what she wanted. She wasn't disbarred for Dan exposing her fraud during their marital agreement or Wendi's mom losing unsupervised visits. And now Wendi can live in Miami. The thing that felt so cringy was when she mentioned that she doesn't have to be on Obamacare, as though she wasn't already getting money from the government because Dan passed away. And her rich parents weren't always helping her like they always have. And then in this episode of the podcast, the students in class get to comment about what they just heard. And they're all like, she's so smart, she's so strong, and how she doesn't get to complain and cry because she's alive. And then everyone just wanted to hug her. They all wanted to know who murdered Dan and why. So Wendi comes back on to respond with her next story and express how she really feels.
10 months ago, someone killed the father of my children. First we got divorced, and then he got murdered. In casual conversations, I don't know whether to call him my ex-late spouse or my late ex-spouse, except that late ex-spouse sounds like latex spouse. Last July, someone, and we still don't know who, shot my ex-husband point blank in the back of the head as he pulled into our garage after driving our then 3- and 4-year-old sons to preschool.
She said first we got divorced, then he got murdered.
Yeah, like there was nothing in between that. And clearly one of her biggest concerns is when casually talking about Dan, she doesn't know what to call him. Her ex-late spouse or her late ex-spouse, except the latter sounds like latex spouse. I have never heard any of those things. It's your murdered ex-husband or simply your deceased ex-husband. It was her ex, not her spouse. Her ex-husband. It's pretty simple. And I keep thinking for an educated person, she says some really dumb things. But this next part is important. So let's get back into it.
We married when I was in my mid-20s, when I thought I could cheat the system and marry a man I lacked passionate love for because, hey, didn't that die anyway during marriage? I saw his intellect and big heart and thought he would make a wonderful father for my children. Our marriage dissolved after the children arrived, as the loneliness of being married to someone that didn't view me as an equal crept in. I do believe he loved me the best way he knew how. I mean, he didn't like fiction, so why read my novel? It was logic, not a lack of love.
So she got married in her mid-20s when she thought she could cheat the system, but what system exactly?
Apparently, according to Wendi, we're systematically supposed to marry someone that we're passionate about. But instead, she married a man that she lacked passionate love for because didn't that die anyway during marriage? That's a really crappy outlook on marriage and love. She didn't love him. She saw his intellect and his big heart, and she thought that he would make a future good dad because she didn't even have kids yet. So I thought that was interesting. But then she says after they had kids, she realized he didn't see her as an equal. And he hated fiction, so why read her novel? She was still stuck on him not reading her novel, even though he did. And he even promoted it on his blog. And I realized that marriage isn't for everyone, but love and marriage to me is about finding someone that you're so passionate about that you want to die with. You don't want to go a minute without them. If you don't feel that way, keep looking. My favorite quote about love is from Meet Joe Black. And I was always searching for the love that Anthony Hopkins tells his daughter to search for in that movie. I hope you have seen this, but that's why I'm with you. Because in the movie, Anthony Hopkins, his character, said that love is passion, obsession, someone you can't live without. I say fall head over heels. Find someone you can love like crazy and who will love you the same way back. I hadn't found that until I found this specimen. But if you're out there and you haven't found that, I would keep looking because both are important, that you love them. And that last part is the most important, that they love you back the same way. And Wendi didn't think that Dan did. He loved her in his own way. But we know that Wendi and her mom were looking for more of a sperm donor and a trophy husband than someone that Wendi could fall in love with. We said this in one of our last videos, but according to Wendi, she didn't even find Dan attractive, but she listened to her mom because he looked good on paper. And sadly, in the end, Dan died for Wendi. He was murdered for Wendi. Just wait, because that will become more and more apparent.
I don't think he would have chosen to die for her. That fate was put on him.
No, of course not. When you're murdered, you don't have a choice.
It feels sacrilegious these days, even to suggest something less than heroic about my latex husband, because he was murdered. He died violently and young, and likely at the hands of a professional killer. And the media had a field day in response. I turned on the news to find photos of my children with Nancy Grace, George Stephanopoulos saying my name in reference to our acrimonious divorce, and a picture my friend took when I was her maid of honor showed as evidence why I should be treated like a murder suspect and not the mother of 2 fatherless boys. I sat on a bench last week to watch the boys play. An older woman sitting next to me commented on how adorable my boys are and asked, "What does your husband do?" I hate this question. I haven't yet said, "He doesn't do much because he's dead," but I think it sometimes. I find when I tell people that my children's father died, they feel sad. But when they ask the follow-up questions and find out we weren't married, they seem to feel better. I don't.
She's still using latex husband as a cheap joke, this time saying latex husband, not even separating the words.
That's so cheesy. It's not even funny. And especially when you're talking about someone who died, and she's saying it in reference to saying she feels like it's sacrilegious to suggest that he's anything less than heroic. And I understand people say don't speak ill of the dead.
Her mentioning sacrilegious, to me, implies that she has much to say negatively about Dan.
Mm-hmm.
So why mention it anyways, right? How mentioning they were divorced before the murder deadens the blow. Like, oh, don't worry, we were already divorced.
Right. Like, I already didn't like him. Like, don't worry, I'm not as hurt. But what was shocking to me is when she said it was probably done by a professional killer. When at this point, detectives hadn't even solved the case yet. They hadn't even made an arrest yet. And she does say that, he rubbed people the wrong way. He's not a likable person. She's even said that in interviews.
Right.
But this next part is Wendi telling her story in response to the prompt, what is the story you tell about your relationship with your mom? And I thought this one was very interesting.
My mom and I have lived together for almost a year. She is selfless, generous, loving, and beautiful. She thinks she is fat. She once got turned down for Weight Watchers because she didn't have enough excess weight to be admitted to the program. She thinks she is stupid. My mom, who won the New York Spelling Bee for middle schoolers when she was only in the 6th grade. I'm so many of the things I am because of who my mom is and who she wants me to be. I was valedictorian of my high school. She seemed proudest that I graduated high school still a virgin.
She's so many things she is because of who her mom is and who she wants Wendi to be. She was valedictorian of high school, but her mom was proudest that she graduated a virgin?
What a weird thing to say.
Yeah.
Like, I wanted to know why she felt that way. I remember reading the bio of her book, and she referred to herself as being a contortionist.
Mm-hmm. I remember you saying that, but I also remember reading that she was in the circus as a kid. So I'm not sure what the extent of that was.
Well, I just thought about how people tend to sexualize contortionists. So maybe her mom, being the proudest, she was still a virgin. But remember, Wendi most likely learned how to lie at an early age.
Yeah, and I also thought that her being a contortionist could be a manipulator too, like contorting people's perspectives of her.
Interesting.
Did Wendi or her mom feel that way, I wondered? I'm hanging on her saying that she's many things that she is because of her mother. And wow, is that going to resonate even further as we go along?
It appears she harbors some sort of resentment towards her mother. It's as if Wendi felt she had no control over things and she's still holding on.
And that could be true. But is she? Because listen to this next part.
I try to draw boundaries with my mom because lately there aren't any. She is caring for my children right now so that I can be here in class, more like a co-parent than a grandmother. But I accept it because as a former kindergarten teacher, she is so adept in that role. She taught my boys how to recite the 44 presidents, just like she taught me when I was 4. I see myself in them, reciting, receiving praise. She has completely changed her life because mine fell apart. I write letters to her in my head every day, ones of immense gratitude for facilitating my return from the bottom. But when we speak, in the few fleeting moments when the kids or my dad don't need something, it comes out like, is the dishwasher clean? And if not, should I run it? Or something else inconsequential about laundry or groceries or aspects of daily life.
She said that she's trying to draw boundaries, but lately there aren't any. But she accepts it because her mom's helping with so much, especially with the boys. And she said that she writes letters in her head to her mother about her gratefulness for her facilitating her return from the bottom. I wonder why she writes letters in her head. Is she worried about thanking her mom on paper, not wanting to leave a paper trail? We know that both Wendi and her mother considered Tallahassee a crappy place to live. Donna was even quoted calling it bumfuck backward Bible Belt town and hated Wendi being stuck there. But the next prompt Wendi was given was lies, and she recalled the death of her friend's father and talked about how sometimes her outward reactions don't match her inner thoughts. I think that's very interesting, but let's hear what Wendi has to say.
My childhood friend Lisa told me this weekend that she never even knew I was unhappy in my marriage. I had no idea I hid it so well. I always thought that I had an expressive face, the kind that easily registered happiness and disappointments. But the more I think about it, the more I realize that most people think I am very happy all of the time, because I smile constantly to try to engage with people, make them smile too. I think this face is a kind of mask that I wear out of a life of endless practice, like a kind of muscle memory for the face. I can even remember one time learning that a friend's father had died, and upon hearing the news, I smiled.
So her childhood friend didn't even know she was unhappy in her marriage. Wendi describes her smiling and acting happy, like she's wearing a mask out of a life of endless practice. And that to me sounds like a sociopath, trying to mirror the emotions of others because you lack them and you lack the appropriate response, which reminds me of her being afraid of what her mother's response would be when she told her that Dan had been shot. And what's even more telling is that Wendi had just said she's most of what she is because of who her mother is. Her mother taught her to be this way. Why would someone smile when they hear that someone died?
I guess when you're only practicing the smile, it's muscle memory.
Exactly. And this reminds me so much of the show Dexter because, spoiler alert, if you haven't watched it, his adopted father is a cop and he knows that Dexter has homicidal tendencies and is a sociopath. And he loves Dexter, so he teaches him how to conform to society. He teaches him the right responses so that he'll fit in.
Right. It would seem that Donna has a similar dynamic with Wendi and probably her other children. Based on everything we've heard in the past few episodes, it seems to be a case of do as mommy says.
It was a bizarre reaction since I loved my friend and her dad very much. We were 13 and I remember him making pancakes for us many a Sunday morning after a few of us slept over. More than 20 years later, I still feel like a freak show thinking back on that moment. If I'm a person that likes to be funny and to use humor and levity to engage with people, then is it an authentic or inauthentic response to smile at the news of something tragic? Am I deluding others or myself when I smile or laugh through the pain of a terrible time? Am I avoiding actually bathing in the grief I need to feel so that when time passes, I will have missed my chance to mourn? Danny used to tell me that everyone thought I was such a nice person and such a good person, but he was the only one that knew the truth about what a bad person I was. He was convinced I had deluded everyone but him.
I don't think we even need to say anything to that one. Dan knew her best, and he saw right through her facade. And yet he didn't leave her.
Both Dan and Jeff seemed to see beyond the flaws. Perhaps they saw the good in her. I do believe us humans are inherently good, but sometimes environments can lead us down a bad path.
But was it real goodness or was it this mask that she wears?
True.
The next prompt given to Wendi was, what was your last intimate moment? Let's see what Wendy's response was.
It should be intimate when a man cries in front of you while you hold each other, and it was, but I wasn't crying. Sometimes I feel like I'm all cried out. This year I told my small children that their father was dead and wasn't ever coming back. And a few nights ago when a beautiful man teared up in my arms, I wondered if I could ever cry at something beautiful again. I shared a piece of writing with him I was trying out for class. It describes a scene where I'm immensely sad. He tells me he was initially impressed with all that I have accomplished, but now he's more taken with what I have endured. I appreciate his words and wonder, why can't I be that woman on the spot? Why do I reserve the written word for a place where I can accurately and painfully express myself, and the in-person, real-life version for the Wendi show, jazz hands and all. I wish I could merge us so we could be less of a weirdo.
I'm actually sick of hearing this. Another man wrapped around her finger, crying to her, praising her for her strength.
To me, it sounds like she wears it like a badge of honor. Also, the fact that she says she wants to merge her two selves together suggests she wants to practice a little self-integration, which I do agree we should all practice some self-integration.
But does she really? And I think it's interesting that she's so much better at writing her thoughts than expressing them out loud. That's why she wrote her thoughts and feelings in that book and wanted Dan to so desperately read it. But I also think it's cowardly not to be able to confront someone in person about your feelings, especially your husband. Maybe in writing, she could fool the world, but in person, they can see her facial expressions and they don't match. So maybe she prefers the paper than eye to eye. I feel like people do that with text messages a lot.
Right, it's easier to conceal one's emotions in a text or a letter than be face-to-face with raw emotion.
And you don't have to worry about the response. You can turn your phone off. You could send them a letter or write it in a book to be deciphered, and their response will be delayed or it can never even come. So in this class assignment, Wendi had a chance to essentially tell her story out loud, but she's still reading it. So she's not really getting a chance to take the mask off. Her teacher asked how it felt telling her story to everyone and getting their reaction.
And I was shaking from head to toe, and I thought, okay, let's just do this. Let's just dive in. I didn't have a plan to do it, but it just felt unavoidable. The words kind of just flew out of me. But then when I was done, I sat there and I couldn't look anyone in the eye, and I was sweaty, and I just thought, okay, now I've done it. Now it's out there. Now what?
And so then how did you feel about the class's reaction?
I felt good. I felt good about the class's reaction. I realized that people had questions, and so some of them were about the writing and how, what might be different ways to tell the same story. And other questions were a bit more like, well, what happened here and what was going on there? And I thought, I don't know if you remember this. I didn't know we were all going to read what we wrote in class. I thought maybe some of us would read if we felt like it. And I didn't think that would be me.
So I asked her what motivated her in that moment to read her story, even when she wasn't expecting to.
I think for me, a lot of the additional pain I felt, on top of the murder and everything associated with, was it felt unfair that I couldn't at least tell my own story, that the story got told for me. So I think there was an aspect of empowerment, of being able to say, no, this is my side of the story. This is what things looked like from my perspective.
Remember, Jeff called her a narcissist, and if that's the case, it seems like she wanted to tell the class to gain attention.
Yeah, she loves the attention, and she got to tell it her way. It's always Wendi's narrative.
She also gets to showcase the opposite of what Jeff told detectives. She can seem like the reasons why she's laughing in the interview room and maybe not acting appropriately was because she's been so used to putting on a happy face in her childhood. She's not guilty of anything, so of course what Jeff said isn't true.
Right. She's trying to make it seem like, no, I don't know how to, on the outside, I don't know how to be right. I sometimes laugh. I do this, I do that. And so if they're listening, detectives would be like, maybe that's why. Because at the time, she and her family refused to talk to the detectives. They were always going through their attorneys. They were not really cooperating with the investigation. So it's almost like a roundabout way for her to paint herself in a certain light, in the light most favorable to her. Wendi comes back in another episode of the podcast. She was asked, what do you have to lose?
In some senses, I feel I have nothing to lose, because when Dee was killed, the media already had a field day with me, our acrimonious divorce, and my potential involvement in the murder of my children's father. So in a sense, they had already taken from me most of the things I would have feared I would lose, like my professional identity, this veneer of safety we sell ourselves, and any semblance of privacy. But the truth is, I've spent the better part of this last year creating a new normal for the boys and me. It's shaky, like a new little calf, wobbly in the knees and aching to walk and then run. And now I feel like I have everything to lose, because I know how tenuous and precious life is. I've spent the better part of this last year creating a new normal for the boys and me. It's shaky, like a new little calf, wobbly in the knees, and aching to walk and then run. And now I feel like I have everything to lose, because I know how tenuous and precious life is, and know that it could be snuffed out in an instant. I mean, if the man I thought I'd spend my life with could be murdered on a sunny summer morning, then what is to stop me from getting cancer and leaving my children orphaned?
So now she realizes how precious life is, that it could be snuffed out in an instant. I guess when it's that close to home, it becomes even more real. But she just told you that people, the media, the public were pegging her as having something to do with Dan's murder. And now she feels like she has a lot to lose.
I have everything to lose: the minutes with my boys at their sweet young ages, while my parents are also young and healthy enough to be rambunctious with them. And so I'm here and participating in this class because I wanted to do something for myself that was more than just occasionally exercising. I love being able to tell my children, Mommy is going to school. And then when they giggle, telling me that adults don't go to school, I got to tell them that learning never stops as long as we are open to new things. And so I say, what do I have to lose in being here? Life feels painfully short these days as I watch my parents age and listen to friends tell me stories of losing their moms and dads. I want to live it fully and well, and I imagine this class won't be a regret.
Instead of going to therapy, she took a writing class.
Yeah. And I mean, she could be also going to therapy.
Right,
when she was
don't know
living
that.
in Tallahassee, she was actually friends with psychologists and social workers and psychiatrists. But that's not to say she actually went to therapy, though. She also wants to live her life to the fullest. And it's crazy to me what's going to happen next. She had no idea what a roller coaster she was about to be on, but perhaps she saw it coming somehow, knew it was a possibility at the very least. Okay, so we're back listening to Wendi, but what about the investigation? Because this podcast Wendi was on was released just before the new year, so at the end of 2015. So as 2016 began, things were about to start closing in when it comes to authorities making that first arrest. And we really want to get through as much as we can to bring everyone up to date in this case, because it is still going on. There are new things making headlines even today. So I really can't wait until we get there. So let's connect the dots. We've actually introduced you to everyone that's going to be important going forward. Now you know all the players at play. Right after everything came out in the media, I told you that the Adelsons stopped talking to investigators and went through their lawyers. Wendi's lawyer put out this statement, quote, "This message is being sent to the media outlets that have asked for a statement or other information on Wendi Adelson. Ms. Adelson requests that the media respect her privacy as she helps her children overcome the unexpected loss of their father. She remains deeply concerned about the safety and well-being of her children. During the ongoing investigation of this tragedy, Ms. Adelson will not be making any further public comments. She and every person acting for her will decline any further requests for information, interviews, or appearances. She encourages anyone who may have information that could help identify the person or persons responsible to please contact the Tallahassee Police Department." End quote. And don't get me wrong, I actually think it's smart not to talk to the media, especially in this day and age when there's AI that can steal your voice, there's deep fakes. And of course, the media is notorious for twisting your words. So it's always best to remain silent and let your attorney speak on your behalf. But really, the investigators had technology on their side. So soon it allowed them to make connections themselves. First, they looked through Sigfredo's call records, looking for any numbers that appeared over and over again, especially more during the time of Dan's murder. Sure enough, from approximately May 1st, 2014 to the day after Dan's murder, one number had close to 3,000 calls, texts, and correspondence with Sigfredo's phone. And it was also a 786 number like his. When they ran it to get the info about the person that owned it, they saw it was connected to Sigfredo's children's mother, his ex, the love of his life, Katie McBanawa. So at first, this wasn't really a smoking gun. Of course, he'd be in contact with her, but the dates that their contact ramped up was suspicious. They had broken up and Sigfredo had moved out in 2013. So why all of a sudden so much back and forth? This prompted them to see if by chance Katie had any connections with the Adelsons. And this is where things get really interesting.
Because it turned out that the same 786 number belonging to Katie was found in both Harvey's call log and Charlie's. So Katie was in contact with two of the Adelsons according to her phone records. But it was Charlie's phone that she connected with the most. Almost 1,000 calls, texts, and correspondence between those same dates of May 2014 to the day after Dan was killed. They realized that there was a work connection between the two of them. Remember we told you that Katie was working as a receptionist for a company called Sophie Dental? Well, Charlie is a dental specialist, so they dug further and found out that Sophie was one of the practices that Charlie floated around to. He'd be called in by Sophie if they had a patient that needed a specialist's services, and the first time Katie and Charlie's call records show they connected was back in 2013. And then from there, the contact got more and more frequent as they continued to analyze their records. They saw that both their phones traveled to places like Key West together at the end of June 2014, the month before Dan was killed. So it was pretty obvious they were dating. But when they drilled down to the day Dan was killed, that's when they found a real bombshell. Think back to the last video when we went over just Wendy's timeline. We mentioned her connecting with both her mother, Donna, and her brother, Charlie, that morning. Remember her mom set up an appointment with Best Buy? She had to get her TV fixed. Well, there were more people connecting that day, and showing it the way we're about to makes things really clear. So here it goes. We're going to start around midnight on July 18th at 12:01 a.m. Katie and Sigfredo's phone were connecting. By 12:07 a.m., Katie and Charlie were talking on the phone, and that call was about 7 minutes long. It ended at 12:14 a.m. At 1:02 a.m., Charlie calls his mom Donna, but that call only lasted a minute. He then turned around and called Katie back at around 1:04 a.m., and they had a 20-minute phone call. It's very interesting. We know Sigfredo was at Dan's the same morning in the green Prius just hours later. We know that Charlie has the means to hire a hitman, and we know that Charlie and Donna hate Dan. It seems very telling.
Yeah, and that 1-minute call between Charlie and Donna in the middle of him talking to Katie right after she speaks to Sigfredo could totally be Charlie saying it's going to happen and just confirming the plan, and then going to Katie and talking to her about specifics. Later that morning, we told you Wendi was at home, waking up and preparing for the TV repairman to show up. Remember Donna calling Wendi at 8:09 a.m. to let her know that the repairman had called her? But Wendi didn't answer, so Donna texted Wendi a couple minutes later at 8:11, letting her know the repairman called and he was on his way to Wendy's. Now, something we didn't tell you is that according to the forensic report of Wendy's phone, she had a calendar event in her phone on that day, July 18th, that simply said, "Fix TV." at 8 a.m. But guess what? Sometime before she handed her phone over to Detective Isom during her interview with him after Dan was shot, Wendi deleted that calendar entry. Why? Why go out of your way to delete an event that day? And it might be true. People might delete something after it happens, but that's not all she deleted from the same day before turning over her phone. At 8:20 a.m., Wendi had texted her brother Charlie and said, quote, "This is so sweet," end quote. But she chose to delete that specific text to him. Why? What was so sweet? They don't talk that day until about 9:19, an hour later, according to records. So what was so sweet of Charlie? And why did Wendi go out of her way to delete that text before handing her phone over to Isom? During her interview, Wendi actually says, "I delete things sometimes." And at that point, she was referencing deleting Dan's parents' numbers from her phone in the past. But could she have also been paranoid about the fact that she deleted these specific items? She seems to say things out loud that maybe she shouldn't. So who knows? But it's also interesting that the TV was a divorce present, and Charlie made that joke that he got her the TV instead of hiring a hitman because it was cheaper. The same TV that's getting fixed that morning.
At the same time these texts are going back and forth, Dan is dropping his boys off at Creative Preschool. A routine people close to him, including Wendi, knows he does. Plus, he called Wendi that morning at 9:02 and told her his plans for the day, that he's going to be at Premier Fitness until like 10:30 or so. He enters the gym at 9:11 a.m., around the same time that Charlie calls Wendi, and they talk for almost 20 minutes. Recall that Wendi told Isom that she was talking to Charlie while making oatmeal, the kind that takes a while to cook. She expressed that she was upset with Dan over him wanting to take the boys swimming that day after preschool because she wanted to pick them up early. And she tells Isom Charlie eased her mind about it. Wendi said, after talking to my brother, I realized if Dan wants to take the boys swimming, it's not a big deal. Well, if Charlie knew that Dan was going to be dead that day, wouldn't it stand to reason Wendi wouldn't have to worry? And Charlie would relay that to her, possibly letting her know things were going exactly according to plan. Because right after this call, Charlie calls his mom, and they talk for about 10 minutes, and then Charlie calls Katie at 9:57 a.m., and they only talk for about 12 seconds. Then Katie calls him back about a minute later at 9:58, and this call is only 13 seconds. And then, that same minute, Charlie calls Katie back. So maybe these were like voice messages, just saying like, hey, call me back, because they're so short. This wasn't clarified on the report, but the next call from 9:58 lasts about 7 minutes.
I think they are voice messages, or like when the call starts to listen to the voice message, it's still counting those little minutes.
Right.
So, because they always seem to call the person right back. I just noticed that. So if you're wondering why, it's usually like, oh, it went for 15 seconds and then person calls back.
Now, at the same time, around 10 a.m., both Lewis and Sigfredo's phones were powered off. But just a minute before they were, Sigfredo received a text. The report doesn't show who sent it to him, but after that text, the phones go off. This was after the Prius is seen driving around the gym parking lot. They were waiting for Dan to come out. They were going to follow him home and shoot him. Apparently, they turned their phone off so they wouldn't ping at his house. But they had already pinged in Tallahassee that morning, and Sigfredo's pinged from the gym while Dan was already there.
Right. And around 10 a.m., Stuart from the kindergarten was texting Dan. Remember that? While he was inside the gym? At 10:06, Charlie calls Wendi again. This time, the call is only 11 seconds. So maybe this went to voicemail, because not even a minute later, Katie is calling Charlie again, and they talk for about a minute. Or again, she could be leaving a message, because a minute later at 10:09, Charlie calls Katie back and they have a 6-minute phone call until 10:15 a.m. Dan is still inside the gym, and Lewis and Sigfredo are circling around in the Prius, just waiting outside. Dan finally leaves the gym at approximately 10:32, and he goes to his car where he sits inside and texts Stuart back at 10:36, telling him he will call him. Then Dan calls his mom, Ruth, and they talk while he's pulling out of the gym parking lot. Both Lewis and Sigfredo's phones are still off, but we saw Dan's car followed by the Prius on the bus camera footage, and they're on their way to Dan's house. Ruth said in her book she was speaking to Dan until he told her he had to make a call to someone about Ben's school. That was Stuart, and he made that call at 10:48. Around this time, Dan was making that turn onto Benton Road towards his house, being followed by Lewis and Sigfredo in the Prius.
Sadly, while Dan is parked in his garage and still speaking with Stuart, he tells him he sees someone coming up the driveway. Dan is shot around 10:52 a.m., and minutes later, the Prius is seen fleeing the scene. The 911 call from James is made at 11:02. Around the same time the TV repairman is leaving Wendy's. He was there at the time Dan was shot. Lewis and Sigfredo's phones were still off, but according to the GPS on the Prius, they were making their way towards South Florida. Just minutes after Dan is shot at 11:06 a.m., Donna's phone reaches out to Charlie's phone, either by call or text, and they don't connect until 11:22, which is about a half hour after Dan had been shot. Charlie calls Donna and they talk for about 10 minutes. So many calls and connections during this whole morning between Donna, Charlie, and Katie, and even Wendi. At 11:30 a.m., Charlie contacts Katie, and it either went to voicemail or was very short because it only registered for 30 seconds. And then a second call attempt was made a minute later, and they talked for 5 minutes, all until about 11:35 a.m. Only a few minutes later at 11:42, Wendi tells Isom she tried calling Dan. He didn't answer, so she left him a 27-second voice message.
We're so close to noon now. Wendi is getting ready to leave her house. Sigfredo's call log shows that while his phone was off, he gets 2 calls to his phone, but he doesn't answer them. It isn't until 12:30 that Sigfredo actually calls Katie, and at this point, his GPS is showing he's pretty far from Tallahassee. He's already past Jacksonville, and he's still heading south. So he probably thought it was safe. He was far enough away from Tallahassee to make that call. That call only lasts about 20 seconds, and this is around the same time that Wendy's call log shows that she's pulling out of her house talking on the phone. She made calls to several of her friends until she gets in touch with Jeff Sopak. He answers, and they chatted for 16 minutes as she drove towards Dan's house to get to that ABC liquor. She passes near Dan's a little after 12:35 while she's still on the phone with Jeff. And then they end their call at 12:47 after she gets to ABC. Remember, she pulls up on Trescott just a couple houses down from Dan's during this time and turns around after seeing yellow tape. Wendy's receipt shows that she purchased that bourbon at 12:49, and a little after that, she's at Mosaic with her friends at 1. She never calls Dan or the kids' school to make sure they're okay after seeing the tape. She just goes and eats.
At 1:24 p.m., Charlie calls Katie and they talk for 2 minutes and 36 seconds. When he hangs up with Katie, he calls his mother, Donna, at 1:36 p.m. and they talk for 3 minutes and 22 seconds. Charlie then calls Donna back at 2:27 p.m. and they talk for 2 minutes. And this is while Wendi is at the restaurant with her friends, and Isom comes to get her before 2:45 because that's when her interview begins. Back at 2:14, she gets a call from her real estate agent, Lisa Carey. She leaves her a message, which we played for you. Wendi misses that call, but while she's waiting for Isom in the interview room, she listens to Lisa's message and then repeats it for Isom. This is when Lisa is asking if Wendi is okay because she heard about a shooting on Trescott. It's a pretty normal reaction to have. Wendi is at the police station until close to 8 p.m. and during that time at 5:21 p.m., Katie texts Charlie saying, "How's work, hon?" Charlie texts back within the same minute saying, "Been busy." And then about 20 minutes later, Katie's calling Sigfredo at 5:46 p.m. and they talk for about 3 minutes and 30 seconds. At this time, Lewis and Sigfredo are still making their way down to South Florida. Remember, at 6:46 p.m., they are caught on CCTV footage outside the ATM in Pembroke Pines.
And not too long after that, Wendi finally makes that call to Donna to tell her that Dan has been shot. That phone call happened at 7:04 p.m. We showed you that recording while Wendi is still at the police station being interviewed. The call lasts 3 minutes and 18 seconds, but Donna calls right back because Wendi got cut off saying something. They talk for another minute or so when Wendi says she just wanted to make sure her mom tells Charlie what happened to Dan for her. Interestingly, Donna will call Charlie, but first at 7:10, Sigfredo calls Katie and they talk for a minute. A couple minutes later, Donna tries to call Charlie, but it seems like it might have gone to voicemail. However, at 7:12, Donna texts Charlie with, "Call us ASAP." Charlie called Donna back a minute later and they talked for 6 minutes. Now there's about to be a lot of back and forth between Donna, Charlie, and Sigfredo, Katie, and Charlie. I hope this isn't too confusing, but we don't want to leave out any details. First, at 8:06 p.m., Sigfredo calls Katie and they talk for under a minute. Then at 8:29, Charlie calls Donna again and they talk for almost 7 minutes. Right after that call, he calls Katie and they talk for 3 minutes. Why? Why is there so much back and forth? I mean, obviously they're exchanging information and I wonder what about. It seems like during the call, Katie gets a call from Sigfredo, but she's on with Charlie. So she calls Sigfredo back afterwards at 8:40 and they talk for about 4 minutes. Now, right after this, around 9 p.m., Donna texts Charlie saying, "Outside your house." And Charlie texts back 10 minutes later and says, 10 minutes. I'm assuming he's on his way home from work and not there yet, and he's telling his mom to wait. He arrives home at around 9:40 p.m. Meanwhile, Katie and Sigfredo talk back and forth a few times through short calls until 9:22 p.m. Then at 9:42, Katie calls Charlie again, and they talk for 30 seconds, or it might be her giving him a voice message. Because right after this, she calls Sigfredo and they talk for a minute or so. Charlie then calls Katie back at 10:12. So all these people are talking throughout the day, back and forth. And I don't know about you, but you're like the only person that I would talk to like that. And I will send like voice messages to my friends throughout the day on my phone. But this is just a lot of calls between these parties. And that night, Donna and Harvey leave South Florida to make the 7-hour drive up to Tallahassee. Katie and Charlie were also texting this whole time. We don't even have all those texts, but they've been texting, mostly small talk about what Charlie's doing at work, when he's going to be off, things like that.
Now, according to the cell phone records and corresponding GPS, that night, Katie and Sigfredo's phones are pinging at the same location in South Florida, at Lewis's house, around 10:30 p.m. What's interesting is Katie and Sigfredo are broken up and have been for a while. They don't live together. They do share custody of their 2 children, but would they be doing an exchange at 10:30 p.m.? Not likely. And we know from information gathered later in this case that they weren't, because Katie actually asked her friend, Yendra Velasquez Mascaro, to watch her kids that night, which was rare. She didn't normally ask her friends to watch them. According to texts between Katie and Charlie, they planned on hanging out at Charlie's that night after he got off work. And according to GPS data from Katie and Charlie's phone, Charlie got home just before 10, and Katie's phone is at his location that night close to 11. Dan passes away just after 1 a.m. And while Katie is at Charlie's, Sigfredo tried calling Katie a few times starting at 3 a.m., but all his calls went to voicemail.
Investigators know there's a connection here. There's no doubt about it. But what about an exchange of money? These illegal type of transactions are usually in cash. And sure enough, when checking both Sigfredo and Lewis's bank accounts, there are no big deposits or anything like that. But as those memes joke around and say, you won't know I won the lottery, but there will be signs. Same here. The investigators start to look for signs that Lewis and Sigfredo were making purchases, maybe bigger ones than usual, so they turn to good old Facebook, where people love to show off. And in Lewis and Sigfredo's case, they posted a bunch of photos of their new toys. One picture from December 2014 shows Lewis and Sigfredo on their new motorcycles. Sigfredo also purchased a Monte Carlo and Nissan Maxima, and Lewis bought a motorcycle and a Toyota Camry. Wow. It really makes me sick that they're just going around purchasing these material things, spending the money on bikes and cars like it meant nothing. It seems really cold, knowing where they got the money from. But now it's time to see if Katie had purchased anything. And she wasn't as smart, if you can even call it that, as Lewis and Sigfredo. She did make deposits into her bank account, starting right after Dan's murder. She made daily deposits anywhere from $200 to $2,000. So where was all this money coming from? Remember, she was working as a receptionist. Financial analysts came in and they went through each of these transactions, and they also looked at Lewis and Sigfredo and Katie's habits before and after the murder. And their habits definitely changed, especially Katie's. She made over $30,000 in deposits in cash over a 6-month period after Dan's murder. That's not a coincidence. These were cash deposits, not checks from a job. But interestingly and surprisingly, Katie was also getting check deposits. They were paychecks every 2 weeks, but it was surprising where they were coming from. None other than the Adelson Institute. Okay, so maybe Charlie had given her a job. That's what investigators thought. But not only did they call there on a few occasions and ask if Katie worked there and got mixed responses from the staff, but Katie's phone never pinged near the Adelson Institute during this time. So why were they paying her? Was it to keep her quiet? She received over $18,000 in paychecks on top of the $30,000 in cash. The checks were not even direct deposits. They were apparently handed to her and signed by none other than Donna Adelson herself. I wish this were a joke, but it's not. It's a scheme. It's a plan. It's a conspiracy, and it is insane.
What's crazier is that Katie and Sigfredo got back together as a couple in the spring of 2015, just under a year after Dan's murder. Yet Katie is seemingly still getting gifts from the Adelsons, one of which was a Lexus that used to belong to the Adelson family. Granted, it was an older car, a 2001, but still, the only proof of title change came in January of 2016, and it was from Harvey over to Katie for a sum of $1,700. That's it.
Oh, and we can't forget to mention the boobs. Yeah, she spent some cash on some new boobies too. But as we said, things are closing in. But the investigators need more. They need proof of knowledge and communication of this plan to peg Donna and Charlie as the ones orchestrating it. So they think of a clever way to get them talking. First, they put wiretaps on Donna, Charlie, and Katie's phones. Then they decided to get an undercover agent to pose as a family member of Lewis's, who, by the way, was already in federal prison serving time on an unrelated charge. What they planned to do was confront Donna and bump into her outside her luxury condo in Miami, where Wendi and the boys were living with her for the past 2 years now. It's called the Icon. It's a 40-story building right on Miami Beach. The plan was for the agent to bump into Donna and tell her he knows that they're taking care of Katie, referring to what we know about the checks, the gifts, But what about their boy Lewis, who helped Donna out with her little problem up north in Tallahassee? You know, murdering Dan? The investigators hope that Donna will take the bait, believe that it's really someone sent by Lewis, and talk to Charlie about it while their phones are tapped. Here's the investigator explaining why they chose Donna to be the target of what they refer to as the bump.
Why did you select Donna Adelson to be the recipient of this bump?
Because we noticed the pattern of calls leading up to the murder and around the time of the murder. The calls were always Donna Adelson to Charlie Adelson to Catherine Magbanwa to Sigfredo Garcia and then back. It was always going back and forth pretty much in that order. So we wanted to start it on one end and see what would happen, see if it would travel that same line of people.
So on April 19th, 2016, an undercover agent named Oscar Jimenez is wearing a recording device, getting audio and video. And there's also an undercover vehicle that's set up across the street recording video of the entire thing. We're going to show you both video perspectives. On the screen to the left is the agent's body cam, and the right is the undercover vehicle. There's Donna. She's walking out of her condo around 1:46 p.m. She's walking down the stairs to the sidewalk, proceeding towards the boys' school, where she's headed to pick them up. At the same time, the agent is walking towards Donna from the opposite direction, and they're about to make contact.
Excuse me, Mrs. Adelson?
I'm going to pause it right here. The agent just said, "Excuse me, Mrs. Adelson," even though he pronounced it wrong. He pronounced it like Adelson. And he's handing her something. Okay, let's go forward now that you have the context.
How you doing? Just want to give you this. Listen.
You scared.
No, don't be scared. Listen, I just want to let you know that we know that your family has been taking care of Katie and her friend Udo for quite some time after your problem up north has been resolved. And I want to let you know that my brother, he's incarcerated. He helped your family with this problem you guys had up north. And we want to make sure that he's going through some rough times, and we want to make sure that you take care of what he's going through the way you're taking care of Katie and Tuzo. Well, this will explain it. Thank you.
Okay, so you saw and heard, but that was kind of muffled, so we want to clarify. The agent bumps into Donna. She's a little bit rattled at first, which is the entire reason they do this, to shake someone up. He tells her, "Don't be scared." He says, "Listen, we just want to let you know that we know that your family has been taking care of Tudo for some time, and your problem up north was resolved. And I want to let you know that my brother is incarcerated, and he helped your family with this problem that you had up north. And we want to make sure that he's going to be taken care of the way that you're taking care of Katie and Tuto." Tuto is Sigfredo's nickname.
Well, Donna looks at the agent and tells him she doesn't know what he's talking about. That is when the agent hands her a piece of paper and said, "Well, this will explain it." And he says, "Thank you." Then he turns and walks away. That's actually a folded up photocopy of a newspaper article from the Miami New Times paper from July 15th of 2015, which included a picture of Dan Markel and a 1-year anniversary write-up about his murder. Below Dan's picture was a phone number and the figure of $5,000. Donna doesn't even look at it. She just keeps walking and puts it in her purse.
What happens next is one of my favorite parts of this entire case.
After Donna's done picking up the boys across the street at school, she goes back to her condo and immediately calls Charlie at 2:09 p.m. She's saying something to Charlie about him dropping by after work to talk about something she got. But after this, you'll hear Charlie ask, "Did someone write you a letter?" To which Donna will respond, "I've got some paper hand-delivered to me." That's the important part to hear and listen. We'll put the transcript from the court on the screen so you can follow along as well.
Did someone write a letter to you or something?
I got some paperwork hand-delivered to me.
You're being sued?
No, that's what I thought it was, but I'm going to need to talk to you.
Okay.
Okay?
Does Dad know about this?
No, Dad's at work today, fortunately.
What's, IRS or?
You know, those IRS people, they kind of bother you sometimes, but, fortunately not now.
Okay.
So I will talk to you. I'll give you a heads up if I'm going to have to drive up that way.
Okay.
Okay? And
does Wendi know that? Is it involve Wendi?
No. So let me just talk to you later. And
what is it? Is everyone's health okay?
Yeah.
All right. Does it involve me or other people?
Well, probably both of us.
What's that?
Probably the two of us. So you probably have a general idea what I'm talking about.
All right.
Let's just find some time to talk to each other.
So it's urgent you talk to me today.
Okay, or tomorrow.
Can I ask you a question? Who is the paperwork sent from?
Something that came hand to me as I exited the building today.
Was it anonymous or?
Oh no, it's not anonymous. It's not anonymous. I just don't want to discuss it over the phone.
Right, whatever it is, it is. I will silly, but if you want,
I wouldn't bother you. Trust me.
Yeah, no, I know. Do you want me to come down to see you tomorrow? I actually have the day off.
Yes, that would be wonderful. Dad actually works later tomorrow. You know, he goes in at 1 o'clock. We both work out at the gym from 9:30 to 10:30. So
whatever it is, I'll take a look at the paperwork.
Yeah.
I hope it's not the IRS.
I just would like you to review it and give me some input as to what your thoughts are.
All right.
Okay. So come down tomorrow. Dad leaves at 12, so anytime after 12 would be good.
12 tomorrow.
Yeah, he leaves at 12. He starts at 1 there, so 12:15.
All right, I'll come down in the afternoon. That way I can hang out with you and see you at 6.
That would be great.
Perfect. All right, I'll talk to you later.
Love you, honey. Bye.
Love you. Bye.
Okay, so I don't know if you heard when Charlie asked her, does this involve Wendi? And Donna's like, no. But when he asked who it involves, Donna's like, probably you and me. So you probably have an idea what it's about. That right there is so telling. Obviously, the problem that Lewis and Sigfredo took care of for Donna was something that both Donna and Charlie orchestrated, that they planned, that they were a part of, because she makes it clear this extension of that issue has come back to haunt them, and it involves the two of them. She knows that telling him that will alert him that it's in regard to Dan.
Seems like Donna doesn't want Harvey to be home when Charlie comes over to discuss the paperwork she got. They are planning it to be after Harvey goes to work, but that's not the end of their discussion that day. Charlie calls his mother back at 2:35, and first he's talking about things like his insurance payments, kind of small talk, but then he starts talking about the paperwork. He starts by telling his mom, listen, whatever someone sent you, I wouldn't worry too much about anything. That's where we're going to listen from.
Listen, whatever it is, whatever someone sent you, I wouldn't worry too much about anything.
Okay.
I mean, so someone can write whatever they want to write. Someone can say whatever they want to say, and I'm not worried. So, but I'm not being sued.
No.
Okay. All right. Honestly, it's whatever it is, and I wouldn't just judging from what you're making it sound like. I wouldn't stress about too much.
Okay, honey. Okay, it's probably nothing. Probably.
Yeah. Listen, people can always write. People can always say anything they want. It doesn't, if someone says you're a bad dentist, it doesn't mean you're a bad dentist. So, but anyway, I'll definitely come down. It actually works out perfectly because I have the day off.
Okay. So I'll make you take me out to dinner, so make sure you bring cash with you.
All right.
Okay?
Do I need to bring cash?
Yeah, if you take me out to dinner, then that's probably a good idea, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was this? I should bring cash. I don't have much cash to bring.
Yeah. I'll see if I have money for dinner. We'll see what I have here. Okay.
Can I ask you, is someone blackmailing you?
No, it's always a good possibility.
You think someone's trying to blackmail you?
Maybe. Could be.
No, that's crazy. Is there, I don't know what anyone's blackmailing for, but is there any way I could see you? You can't come up here at all?
It's going to be difficult.
Was this, can I just ask you this? Is this anything government related, or is this like whack job writing a letter to you?
Like who?
Is it like a whack job writing a letter to you, or is this government related?
No, I don't know if it's government related.
So it's not government or military or anything like that?
No.
Who is the letter addressed to?
Me.
To you? That's crazy. Did it have a? Do you know who sent it to you?
Not a pretty good idea. But we'll talk later.
Is it so? Who whoever sent you the letter sent you an anonymous letter.
No, it's not really anonymous.
Did they sign it?
It's hand-delivered.
So someone showed up. Was it like by a process server?
That's what I thought it was.
It wasn't.
No.
Where did they come to you at?
When I walked out of the building, and I make a right, and I go past both driveways with the icon.
Right.
And I'm on the sidewalk, and I'm about 5 feet from pressing the button so that I can cross the street to pick up the boys close to me.
Right.
And just as I got on the sidewalk. Yeah.
And he came over and handed you. Was it a young guy, old guy?
I would say probably mid-30s. I wouldn't forget that face.
Really?
Yeah.
It's crazy that someone handed you a letter like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Is the person like threatening you or anything?
You never know how to interpret these things. So let's not worry, and let's meet tomorrow. I think that's better. Let's meet tomorrow afternoon.
All right. Let me ask you this: do you want to take a picture of the letter and send me what someone sent you?
No, not really. I'm going to do that.
So it wasn't the government or the military or somebody, it was just some random person.
Yeah.
That's fucking crazy. How long was the letter?
No, it was just a copy of an article. It's what was written on the letter. That was written on a copy of that letter.
Is the person threatening you?
I don't think we should.
All right. I mean, it's kind of thing. If there's a threat, you go to the police.
Yeah.
But anyway, let me.
I don't think that's a good idea.
Well, I don't mean it's people threaten you. Got to go to the police. But let me talk. Let me see what it is. Let me see what nonsense it is first.
Okay.
It won't be the first time I've been threatened.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I'd like you to just see it, see what you think. So let's do that. Let's make it around 12:20, 12:30 tomorrow. That would be ideal. Okay.
Okay. You got it.
Come down, just play with the boys a little bit. Okay.
All right. Yeah. No. Come down. I'll see you. I'll play with the boys.
Yeah.
No worries.
Okay.
All right. If it's something serious, I'm going to recommend going to the police. So.
Oh no, I know. That's what I'm thinking to do.
So. All right. Sounds good.
Let's talk tomorrow. Okay.
All right. You got it. Love you.
Love you.
Interesting that Donna interrupts and tells Charlie to bring cash if he wants to take her out to dinner, as though he can't use a credit card or a debit card. That was clearly a signal. And Charlie caught on right away because he's like, wait, you want me to bring cash? I don't have that much cash on me. And then he straight up asked Donna if someone is blackmailing her. And she said, that's a possibility.
Okay, so Charlie asked if someone was threatening her and said, if so, she needs to go to the police. But Donna's like, I don't think that's a good idea.
That's interesting. It really is. And Donna is slick. I mean, especially for her age, she's really on the ball. Not that it's a good thing in this type of situation, but she's basically telling Charlie she doesn't want to talk over the phone about it. It's like they knew that someone could be listening. And I didn't know how easy it was for the government to listen to cell phone calls. They can remotely tap in. I don't know why I'm just realizing how easy that is, but guess what? Charlie just can't resist. He calls his mom back again. This call is at 3:00, so just 15 minutes after they hung up. It begins with Charlie telling Donna not to talk about this in the condo. And I thought, who would she be talking to in the condo? He's clearly worried someone would be listening or watching them from inside their own homes. So let's listen.
Hey, Charlie.
Hey, sorry about that. Quick question for you. One thing I was going to tell you is obviously don't talk about things in the apartment or any place.
No, obviously.
The other thing is, was a person black, white, Hispanic?
White.
And they just came up to you and they said your name and they handed you a piece of paper?
No, didn't hand it right away. First spoke to me for a while and then handed it to me.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
And were they wearing hats, sunglasses, or?
No, nothing. Nothing. You could describe him to a T.
What's that?
You could describe him to a T. No, nothing.
Was the person nervous or were they angry? Or?
No, calm as could be. Totally calm.
That's really crazy. Are they trying to ask for money or something?
Yeah.
But is someone trying to? I mean, listen. If it's something like that, it sounds probably like you go to the police. But
I may have to, but I'd rather talk to you first and then.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. There's scumbags out there all the time that try to do stuff like that.
Oh, I know.
So
that's why I just want you to see, because I don't want, I don't want your father upset.
Don't say anything to Dad until I take a look at it, because Dad flies off the on everything.
That's why I suggested after he goes to work tomorrow.
Okay. Now maybe Donna would talk to Harvey about this. I'm not sure, but Charlie tells her not to because he flies off the handle at everything. And Donna was like, that's why she wanted to meet Charlie after Harvey left the next day. It's also interesting that he wanted to know if the person was white, Hispanic, and whether they were disguised. I promise I'll stop interrupting, but I want to mention these things so we can discuss them. But I also stopped it because this next part is crazy. So much will come together with just one sentence that Donna utters to Charlie. Are you ready for this? Listen carefully.
Did the person give you any kind of like time frame or anything?
No.
Okay.
But it's clear. It's clear what's wanted.
Can I just ask you, what did they ask for?
I don't know. This TV was probably about $5,000.
They asked you for $5,000?
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
Oh my God. Did you hear it?
Uh-huh.
The TV reference? I was like jumping up and down when this trial was going on. I was like, no effing way. Charlie asked if this person wanted money. And Donna says, this TV is probably about $5,000. And Charlie responded by saying, they asked you for $5,000? And Donna was like, uh-huh. And Charlie's like, that's crazy. But it's the TV reference there. She said, this TV is $5,000. This TV, as in there was another TV. Oh my gosh. And the other TV was a different price, obviously. And the TV is a code word for Dan Markel. And remember the TV that Charlie gave to Wendi as a divorce present? But it wasn't, instead of a hitman, it was in addition to. And the appointment Donna made for the Best Buy repairman to come on the exact same day, during the exact same time frame that Dan was taken care of. And Wendi put fixed TV as the calendar entry. Yeah, they fixed the TV problem all right. That really ties it all together for me. As soon as Donna said this TV is $5,000, Charlie knew right away that she was referencing money. But the next part makes it even more clear.
Yeah, I
mentioned, like an ex-girlfriend.
That's crazy. Let me take a look at it,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'll go from there. Let me take a look, and then I'll go from there.
If you wanted to go to dinner, we'll see where we'll go.
Yeah, I'll go down in the afternoon, and I'll take a look at whatever someone's going to say.
Maybe we'll go for a walk on the beach or something. It's just going to be nice tomorrow.
All right, sounds good.
Okay.
All right, sounds good.
All right. Love you too, honey. Bye-bye.
Well, that's that. It's clear Don and Charlie need to talk, and they want to do it in private. It's about money. It's about being blackmailed, and it involved both Donna and Charlie and the person mentioned, an ex-girlfriend. Investigators know they are truly onto something. And Charlie wasn't done talking to people that day. At 4:27 p.m., Charlie called Katie, the ex-girlfriend. Even though she wasn't mentioned by name, Charlie had a bunch of different women in his life, but he specifically called Katie.
I just want you to listen to me, and I'll be able to talk to you in person when I see you tomorrow.
Okay.
Because I don't know what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
but my mom walked the kids. I only heard part of the story, and I'm going to go down there and talk to her tomorrow to find out what's going on.
Okay.
She didn't want to elaborate, but she said that someone approached her on the street, called her by name, handed her an envelope with something in it.
Yeah.
And somebody was, she really wouldn't go into detail. And listen, I have no idea what this is in reference to. Something regarding her son, something regarding his ex-girlfriend, and the person asking my mom for some money.
What?
Yeah. So I said, I'm like, first when she was saying, I thought it was like something involved in the IRS or a patron or something like that. So I don't even know what the fuck it's about at all.
So somebody just like bumped into your mom like that?
Well, they came up to her on the street after she dropped the kids off at school. I guess she brought them to school. I don't even know. But they must know her routine and must know who she is. They walked up to her. They called her by name. They handed her an envelope. She said they spoke to her for a few minutes. And then she said they were making reference to my ex-girlfriend, which I have no fucking clue what that's about.
Yeah.
And then they explained that they needed to be paid some money.
For what?
I don't even know. His mom didn't even want to talk to me on the phone. I'm like, well,
But like, did she see the person? Was she like, she should have?
Oh yeah, I said, listen, that's what I said. I said, someone's going to try to blackmail you or something.
Exactly, or threaten you like that.
I said, you got to go straight to the police. She's like, I don't even know what this is about. I don't want to talk about it. I go, well, take a picture and send me what it is. She's like, I just want you to see it in person. So I'm going to go there. I can't even fucking go there today because I won't get out of work until 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
So she's like, just come
well,
down
somebody's
there.
like stalking your mom?
I don't even fucking know. I don't know what's going on, what my mom's involved. I mean, you didn't do anything with my mom. I mean, yes.
I don't know what I do with my mom.
Okay, just checking. Just checking. Yeah. I don't know what you can do.
No, but I feel there for your mom. Like, what the hell?
Yeah, well, I don't know.
A random person, like, just going up to your mom, like, hello.
Yeah, and my mom said it involved your ex-girlfriend, so I don't even think she said who. I'm just like, you're my last girlfriend, so that's why I'm calling you.
What do they want from her?
I have no idea. So anyway, I'm gonna find out. Well, they wanted money.
I know exactly. Did she tell you like what?
No, she was just kind of like a little bit rattled and with the kids, and was like, listen, I should have had the day off tomorrow, so she's like, come down and talk to me. So I'm going down tomorrow, talk to her, and then I don't remember if she said anything to do with you. If they're mentioning you or any reference to you, I'll keep you posted.
Why not saying me? You have like
well,
a husband and girlfriend.
Well, fuck, it could be any. So I just assumed that.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, doesn't matter. So I may want to see you tomorrow if it does have anything to do with you. If it doesn't, then I feel like a fucking idiot for even bothering, wasting your time. But if it does,
I just feel bad for your mom. Like, who the hell? Like, if that was me, I would have like called the house right away. Be like,
I know. I said, Mom, was the guy wearing a hat,
and
glasses? Mom was like, no. I could pick the person out of the lineup in a second. They came over to me. They spoke to me very politely. It was a white male in his 30s. No hat, no glasses. Just a white male in his 30s. Came up to her, knew who she was, and addressed her. So. But anyway, neither here nor there. I'll feel like an idiot if it was some other ex. But anyway.
Yeah. Did you have any fight with him ever out of the house or something?
I don't know. I mean, maybe I should just be calling everybody today.
No, yeah, you should try to find out.
I thought when I spoke to my mom, she said it involved, they mentioned your name in it. That's why I was calling you, but I'm going to feel like an idiot if they didn't. So, but anyway, are you working tomorrow? What's your story?
Yeah, but you can always talk about your day. Doesn't matter.
What time you finish work tomorrow?
Oh, it doesn't matter. Well, like I told them, like I'm usually between like 9:30 to 4-ish. It depends.
Okay, I got to get back in there. I'm going to be in Miami, and when I'm done hanging out down there, I'm going to come and see you. Okay?
Yeah.
So now Charlie's kind of inquiring to Katie if she may know what this is all about, and she makes it clear that she doesn't. He plans to meet up with her in person the next day as well as his mom to sort things out. It's just interesting that the three of them are talking in connection to something regarding their problem up north, which is Dan. And the very next day on April 20th, Charlie met up with his mom, Donna, outside on the water in the back of a restaurant called Monty's, right near her condo, where no one could hear them talking. The FBI tried to enhance the audio from a device that the investigators put out there about 40 feet away, but they just couldn't catch it. We won't know what was discussed. But later that afternoon, Charlie met with Katie at a restaurant called Dolce Vita, and what they didn't know was that an undercover agent was there, and he was capturing audio and video. There was a camera hidden inside of a bag, so you can only catch a glimpse of them, but there is a recording. The quality's so bad. We just cannot, even though the FBI enhanced it, but we are going to provide you with what was said because we have the transcript. It was smart guy Charlie. He thinks he's smart, and he's explaining to Katie in a metaphor that, you know, how investigators get people to talk. They throw smoke grenades and it gets the cockroaches to come running out. He's insinuating that someone's trying to get them to talk. Even if they bug us, if we don't talk, then they don't have anything. The funny thing is they're recording him speaking in that exact moment. You can't really hear Katie, but you can hear Charlie somewhat. And not everything he says is important, but there are a few things he said that caught my attention. He and Katie both say that they're going to start carrying guns. And Katie says she's already carrying hers. And Charlie's like, yeah, if someone comes up to me and they ask me for money, I'm going to pull out my gun. And then when the cops show up and there's a dead gang member laying on a driveway and there's a doctor, an oral surgeon standing above them, he said the cops aren't going to come down too hard on him compared to the gang member. So I thought that was very interesting. He puts himself in such a higher regard because he's a doctor. He also said that he's not going to be talking to any cops unless they charge him with something. He's saying this because they think it may be a cop who approached Donna, but they can't be sure yet.
He also told Katie that this person went through a whole lot of trouble to know his mother's routine and how to approach her, and he doesn't think this person's going away. He thinks they're going to come back and keep asking them for money. But then he gives Katie this analogy where he says, let's say that somebody went to the cops and said, I know my brother did it. Which is kind of interesting that he's using this example and he's giving a hypothetical about somebody going to the cops and telling them their brother committed a crime.
Right? He's giving the exact hypothetical.
But he's like, let's say they did. Let's say they went right to the cops and said, my brother did this. He says that the cops are going to ask them to prove it. And then the cops are going to ask a bunch of questions like what kind of gun was used, whether they saw the brother do it. And when that person can't give them the answers, because they weren't there. So in Charlie's mind, he tells Katie very confidently that all the person would be able to tell the cops is that they didn't see it, but their brother told them he did it. Charlie calls this secondhand knowledge and says that it's not admissible in court.
He's now a lawyer too.
Right.
He's a doctor. He's also a lawyer. So what he's saying is in his perspective, someone had to have seen it. They have to put the person at the scene. So in essence, what Charlie's saying is that nobody can put Charlie at the scene of the crime. And I think we know what crime he's talking about, the one involving Dan Markel. And in Charlie's mind, he can't be found guilty because there's no proof. I wonder if he realizes just how wrong he is and how ironic it is that he is being recorded. It's almost as though he's trying to convince himself that he and Katie won't be implicated since they weren't there when it happened. Then he mentioned that the guy who bumped into Donna said he was sent by Tuto. And he said, I don't even know who that is. But we do, and Katie does. Tuto is Sigfredo. The agent mentioned Tuto as someone Donna was helping, and the agent was saying he hoped they would help Tato, who is Lewis. Charlie also felt relieved that they didn't mention him by name, telling Katie that they must only know part of the story. And then he goes on to ask Katie an important question. He's like, let me ask you a question. Did you take any of the money? We can't hear if Katie ever responds to that, but Charlie goes on to say, it's not like you're driving around in a Bentley or cruising around in a mega yacht, you know? But I guess Charlie only knows part of the story too, because we know that Katie was depositing cash into her bank accounts. But then Charlie makes an even more incriminating statement. He uses an example. He says, let's say you have a car and you can link this person to renting that car and it's used at the scene of a crime, but you have to also prove that they were driving it too, that it was them behind the wheel, not that they let a friend borrow the car or anything like that. So essentially with each one of these arguments, Charlie's saying he's so far removed from the crime, and so is Katie, and that they weren't there, so they couldn't prove they had anything to do with it. I don't think he really understands how conspiracies work, or he thinks he's so much smarter than everyone else. This is a man who has a license plate that says maestro. That's the Italian word for master, but it usually signifies that someone is a conductor, they're controlling, they're in charge of the orchestra, orchestrating something, pulling the strings. And wow, is that so fitting here. The maestro in charge of pulling the strings on everyone involved, hoping they'll take the fall because he's so far removed.
Then Charlie is asking Katie if it was a cop, then why didn't they know it was me? Why didn't they mention my name? He's like, if they thought I had something to do with it, they would find me and they would come talk to me. And Charlie was like, obviously the person doesn't know that we dated because that's a direct connection. He couldn't be more wrong. And in his reasoning, he's almost saying they need to talk to someone who knows what went on. So wouldn't it make sense that your connection with my family is me?
So what he's essentially saying is like, why go to Donna when you and I are the connection? Like she's the connection to his family. And that's exactly what the investigators already figured out. And yes, Charlie, it makes perfect sense. The investigators already know that. He's so dumb that he even mentions, you're working at the office because that's where the checks are coming from. He's mentioning this, not knowing that he's being recorded. So he's basically filling in all the gaps. Yeah. He's trying to say that they're trying to make it look like she's working there on the weekends and cleaning or something. And that's why they've been writing these checks to her. It's like they think they have it all figured out and that the investigators are never going to find all these connections. And there's something that's becoming a little more clear now. There is somewhat of a disconnection between Charlie and who actually committed the crime. He already said he doesn't know who Tudo is. And he also says in this conversation with Katie that this person who came to speak to his mom said they were coming on behalf of someone in jail. And Charlie said, I don't even know anyone in jail. However, Katie does, because Katie is the link between Charlie, Sigfredo, and Lewis. That's going to come together later. But at this point, Katie seems to have kept these parties separated for a good reason. And it will all make sense.
This conversation goes on for a good 40 minutes, and a lot of it is the same thing we already told you. But at one point, Charlie tells Katie what the plan will be going forward. The plan to deal with this person who made the contact with his mom. Remember, he left a phone number. It's a 305 area code, which means it's from the Miami area. And clearly, Charlie is telling Katie this person wants to be contacted.
But they're not sure if this is a cop or if it's some psycho who's been reading the newspapers and is just coming to them because the story's been everywhere. And maybe they're just some weirdo that's trying to blackmail them. So he doesn't want to give them money because what if they come back for more? But if it is a cop, well, how are they going to prove anything?
Right.
And I just have to mention this next thing. He's like, I'm not going to let them have my phone because I got a bunch of naked pictures of myself on it. And he's like, nope, come back with a warrant because I don't want you looking at all these pictures of myself. It was so weird. And it's like, at one point, he literally says, I'm serious. I don't want them laughing at my pee-pee. And it's almost like he thinks it's funny, like it's some kind of game. So they start to come up with a plan. Charlie tells Katie he's going to give her some money and he wants her to call that number. And he wants her to tell the person that they're aware that they reached out to the Adelsons and that this guy mentioned her. And he didn't, but that's like Charlie kind of pulling a fast one on her. And she's like, I'm just going to give you a charitable donation for the less fortunate. But I don't want you contacting these people ever again. So she's basically like kind of threatening them, but also giving them the money, but as a donation. And this next part was kind of humorous to me. He was telling Katie that if it was really the cops, they're not allowed to take the money. And then he kind of just goes on this rant like they better not mess with my family or I'll go Nazi on them. He said that. We told you we thought that this was all to maybe keep her quiet, giving her the car, giving her the money, those checks. And she knows so much. She's the connection, like Charlie said. She's the connection to the bad people who killed someone. So Charlie could be scared that Katie could turn on him. Who knows?
Charlie then calls his mom, reassuring her that he spoke to his friend and that she was okay with the plan and that she had nothing to worry about. The next day, Katie and Sigfredo talked about trying to find out who this person was that confronted Donna, almost accusing Sigfredo of possibly being involved, to which he argued in no uncertain terms that he was not in any way part of the blackmail scheme. And then she tried to pass the assignment off on him to get him to call the number that the agent left for Donna. She gave Sigfredo the number, and he finally agreed he'd take care of it. But apparently no calls came into the agent because by April 25th, the investigators had decided to turn up the heat. They put a letter in the mail and sent it to the Adelsons reading, "My phone is not ringing, so you don't care about Todd and what he did for you. He knows he is fucked, and soon so will you." Now they use the name Tato on purpose because the last time the agent mentioned Tuto, saying he knew Donna was helping Tudo and Katie, and now his brother needed help. Now they are spelling it out for the Adelsons and specifically mentioning Tato. On the 27th, Harvey retrieved the mail, including the letter, and he opened it and read that message. Apparently, he was upset upon finding it, but it's not clear if he was aware of what it entails, because the only mention from Donna to Charlie about Harvey reading it was that he's still upset over it, and he's not having the best day. But Charlie once again reassures his mom that everything is taken care of and tells her they did call that number, but no one answered. The truth is, no one wanted to call. Sigfredo didn't, Katie didn't, and Sigfredo straight up told Katie to deal with her own crap.
Well, since no one was actually calling the agent, they once again took it a step further. They had the agent make a call to the Adelson Institute asking for Donna. One of the receptionists named Erica answered, and the agent said his name was Sammy, and that he was calling in regard to some paperwork that he dropped off to Donna. He once again left his number, and Erica wrote it down and told him that Donna wasn't in at the moment, but she'd give her the message. The agent made sure to relay how important it was for Donna to get in touch. Well, after Erica relays the message to Donna, she, of course, calls Charlie, and she's really upset. They're now calling their office, and she explained that a man named Sammy told Erica that he had dropped off some papers and that they were very important, and she needs to call him back. She was pissed because she thought that Katie was going to follow through, and apparently this wasn't taken care of. So Charlie calls Katie, and this is a long call. It's almost 30 minutes long, and there's so many F-bombs and profanity. We're not going to even try to play it, and it won't even be worth it because all it is basically Katie being overconfident, acting like she's really powerful and like she's in a gang herself. Like she has this air about her, and she's going off on Charlie, telling him that she called the number and it's not even a real number and that she's not going to put up with this BS anymore. This actually gave me a lot of insight into who Katie thinks she is. And I think this has a lot to do with how all of this came together. Katie is one of these people who really wanted the good life. She was surrounded by very wealthy people. She was working in all these different doctors' offices, and she was involved with Charlie. And of course, he's giving her gifts. He's bringing her out to these lavish dinners. He brings her on vacations, and she wants more. That's going to become apparent because investigators tear through all of their text messages, and it's clear what Katie's intentions are. But Charlie's a playboy. Charlie has no intentions of settling down with Katie. However, Katie knows that Charlie and his family have this little problem named Dan. And I don't know how much Katie really understood about Sigfredo and Lewis and what they were really a part of. But in her mind, she must have believed that they were involved in gangs, so they had the power to take care of people. And clearly they did, but in what way? In an organized manner, or leaving a paper trail and having investigators being able to pick everything apart right away? Either way, there was clearly a conversation that eventually happened between Katie and Charlie at some point, where she informed Charlie that she had a way of taking care of his problem, and she knew Charlie was good for the money because it's obvious from his lifestyle that he's a millionaire. So we now know Sigfredo, Lewis, and Katie are involved with the Adelsons, specifically Charlie, and we know that that deal was made somehow. Although we don't know the specifics at this point, and neither do detectives. But after the murder, we know that Katie is back in a relationship with Sigfredo, and Charlie has moved on. He has a new girlfriend, he's living his life. It seems like he had been using Katie for the things that he usually uses women for, but also for her ability to help him with his little Dan problem. He's even got her on payroll. He's trying to make sure everything is cool. But now it seems like it's slipping through their fingertips. It's clear from that very intense phone call between Charlie and Katie that they're scared, especially Katie. I could tell by the way she was being so defensive that she's afraid that the authorities are catching on.
In the heated exchange, Charlie pretty much threatens Katie by telling her to find out who the F the person is trying to blackmail them. Because if not, the FBI is probably going to be asking questions specifically about who Katie is. He's trying to put pressure on her, and she yells at him saying that this is bullshit. And she yells for a while, going on and on about how she's going to take care of this and how she's getting irritated and how pissed she is at that point. Then Katie, at point blank, tells him she's going to go to the cops. Charlie responded by saying, well, either you go to the cops or we're going to go to the cops, but find out who the F this person is. Charlie then calls his mom back and says that he's going to have to take matters into his own hands because he's not making any progress with his friend taking care of it. And actually, Charlie does end up calling the number himself because he's had it and he wants to figure out who it is. We do have that recording, so we'll play it for you now.
Hello?
Hola,
Hello?
diga. Hello, diga.
Hi, who is this?
Who's this?
Someone's been calling my family. I'm trying to figure out who this is.
In reference to what, man?
Someone by the name of Sammy called?
Yeah, that's me, man.
All right, what's going on?
Well, what's going on is my brother Tato. Okay, my brother Tato has not been taken care of. His family's not been taken care of. I talked to a dentist. Why are you calling me? Who are you? I gave the number to a lady.
I don't know Tato.
You don't know Tato? I'm sure you
No.
know Katie and Tuto. They've been taken care of since the family's problem been taken care of up north.
I don't know who these people are.
You don't? Well, this isn't going away, my friend. Because let me tell you something. I was at Broward with Tato, and he told me the whole story. He told me nobody was taking care of him. Nobody was taking care of his family. The family was taking care of Katie and Tuto, and nothing's been taken care of with Tato. So we know what's going on. And Tato needs to be taken care of. Do the right thing. The lady already has the paperwork. She knows what I'm talking about. We know Katie. We know Tuto. We know they've been taken care of.
All right, let me look into
No more fucking around, man. No more fucking around. This ain't going away. You guys need to do the right thing for Tato. That's my brother, man. That's my brother, and he needs to be taken care of. His family needs to be taken care of, just like Katie and Tuto been taken care of.
I've never met these people, but let me call you back, okay?
That's bullshit, man. You know exactly what I'm talking about. If you know this lady, I don't know your relationship to this lady, but we know what the fuck is going on. This ain't going away. Take care of Tato just like you take care of Katie and Tuto, man.
Let me call you back.
Clearly, Charlie is a bit confused, and we told you there's a little bit of a disconnection, which is on purpose on Katie's part, between Tato and Tuto and Charlie. He and Katie are connected, but Katie's the one that's connected to the other two, not him. That, as I will repeat, was on purpose on Katie's part. And guess why? Sigfredo was not a fan of Charlie. He wouldn't have done any favors for the dentist, as he referred to him. When Katie came to Sigfredo with this plan, it wasn't apparent to Sigfredo who the hit was on behalf of. All that was shared was that it was a friend of Katie's. And as a matter of fact, Sigfredo had actually tried to run over Charlie and Katie when they were having dinner together one night. We'll get into all of that, but I thought it was important to share. Recall that Sigfredo call records show him calling Harvey on July 1st, and that was the initial connection between the hitmen and the Adelson family. You'll never believe what that call was about. It wasn't in regard to the hit. Believe it or not, it was all to do with Sigfredo hating the dentist and not being able to handle that Katie had moved on to this millionaire guy who he saw taking her out on jet skis and to nice restaurants, flaunting his cash and his nice cars. He was beside himself and so angry that he looked into Katie's phone for a number for the dentist, and he happened to find Harvey's, who's also a dentist, and he thought that he had Charlie's number. So on July 1st, he called and left a really nasty message yelling and cursing at who he believed was the dentist that Katie was seeing. He didn't even know his name at the time. Instead, he had called Harvey's phone. When Charlie got word and passed it on to Katie, she called Harvey herself and apologized. She relayed to her friend Yindra how embarrassed she was about the whole thing. I couldn't believe it. I mean, investigators would have still connected these people, but I found it to be funny that jealousy led to this phone call from Sigfredo to Harvey's phone. So this whole time, Katie knows exactly who the agent is referring to when he's saying Tato and Tuto, but she's not letting on to Charlie that she knows. Meanwhile, she's relaying to Sigfredo that someone said Tato and Tuto and that they must be getting closer and closer to figuring things out, and they're getting worried.
Specifically because they're saying that they're Lewis's brother, and Sigfredo finds that to be interesting. So he actually calls the number, finally, and he gets a voice message. Nobody picks up. And on that voice message is someone speaking Spanish, saying that they're busy and to call back. So he relays this to Katie that the person doesn't even sound Mexican. They sound like they're from New York or something.
Right. So he's like, somebody is messing with us. But Sigfredo lies and says that he left a message cussing the guy out. That never happened. Everyone's lying to one another. Sigfredo is telling Katie that he's taking care of it. Katie's telling Charlie that she's taking care of it. And no one's
taking care of it.
Exactly, because everyone's scared. But things seem to go back to normal until May 4th, when the undercover agent sends a text message straight to Donna's phone. They still didn't feel they had enough to make an arrest, so they put even more pressure on them. The text said, "So you don't take me serious. You think I'm playing? You have some puta call me and see if I'm for real? You think what Katie's baby daddy did for you can't come back? You're crazy. I want the money now, or I'm going to get the $100,000. Now, the $100,000 is actually the reward money that's being offered by police and investigators for any information that can lead to an arrest. So the undercover agent is trying to insinuate to Donna that if she doesn't give him the money and cooperate with him, he's going to go to the police and tell what he knows. And this did exactly what the investigators wanted. It put the whole family on edge. And the next day, on May 5th, Charlie, Donna, and Harvey get together and they talk outside of the condo near the water. And investigators, they did try to hear some of the conversation, but they were basically whispering, so nothing was captured. However, this new plan was for Donna to go ahead and pay the $5,000 as soon as she could. But she was supposed to let the blackmailer know that this was never going to happen again. It was going to be this one time and they better go away. So the next day on May 6th, guess who has the balls to actually call the number herself? I kind of couldn't believe it.
It's Donna.
Yes. So she calls and we're going to play it. It is 8 minutes long, but it's good. So listen carefully. We also have to bleep out the F-bombs because there's quite a few of them from the agent. And of course, I'm interested in your thoughts. What does Donna know?
Hello?
This is Mrs. Adelson. Is this Sammy? Sammy. Okay. My grandchildren had my phone before, so
Senora Adelson?
I'm Mrs. Adelson.
Yes.
Yeah, my grandchildren had my phone before, so and I just saw that you called.
Oh, okay.
I would.
You left a message on my voicemail.
Right, I did. So This is my problem. You approached me on Alton Road. You handed me an article from the newspaper about my ex-son-in-law. You told me I need to call you and help your friend who is in prison. Now, at the time you did that, I didn't understand what you were talking about. I didn't call you back. Then you mail me a threatening letter. Then you send me a text message to my phone that says I'm not taking you seriously. So I am taking you seriously, and I really want you to listen to me.
I'm listening.
I have to tell you, I mean, this is important. I have been so stressed out. I have spoken to 10 or 12 people who are close friends of mine, telling them about this and basically picking their brains and asking them what I should do, because I don't know your friend who is in jail. You mentioned a name. I don't even know his name. I never spoke to him. I don't know what he looks like. I've never met him. I'm sorry your friend's in jail, but I don't know what that has to do with me.
You know exactly what it has to do with. You know exactly what it. Listen to me carefully. Listen to me. You just got to listen to me.
You need to ask your friend who this person looks like, what their name is, something, because I know there's a big reward out there, and if you need money for your friends, that's a way to get it. I mean, I'm asking you nicely. I don't know who he is. I am out of the loop. It is not me. If I can help, I would help. I mean, that's why.
I told you. Listen to me. Just like I told you that day. We know that your family had a problem up north. We know that problem was taken care of about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And we know that Katie had been taken care of and has been taken care of. Now my brother in jail, we were in Broward together. He told me the whole thing, and he hasn't been taken care of. All that's being asked for is $5K. That's all we're asking for is for $5K. And he told me everything, and I know everything. I know who's involved. I know everything, and I'll get the $100K for myself.
You know, honestly,
all I ask is to send the $5K. Everybody knows what's going on.
I don't. You're saying everyone knows. I know I lost my ex-son-in-law. I did not have anything to do with it. That's why I said ask him what the person. That's what my brother Tato told me. He told me everything when we were in jail. He told me everything and who was involved. I know everything. Well, I don't. That's the problem. I am telling you, it's not me. It's not me. I have had a year of aggravation, a year and a half of aggravation over this. My daughter, my grandchildren. It is not me. And when I asked my friends, what do they think? They said, well, this person needs to get a description of you because of what you look like. It's not me. I don't know who caused this. It wasn't me. I mean, I don't know. I'll tell you, just like that day when I talked to you, this is not going away. This is not going to go away because Tato told me everything. He wasn't being taken care of. He needed the $5K. Send $5K. That's all we were asking for. But I don't do that. I don't know who Tato is. You don't understand. We know you don't know who Tato is, but you know who Katie is, and you know the contacts Katie has, and she has. Listen to me. Let's stop fucking around. Okay?
You know who Katie is. And you know that Katie has somebody that knows Tato. And they took care of a problem for you people. That's just the bottom line. The bottom line is you know who the fuck Katie is.
Look, I don't.
I no more Mr. No, I'm not fucking around with it. You know who Katie is. You know that they took care of Katie and her people. Nobody's taking care of Tato. I know you don't know who Tato is.
No, I don't.
But we know who all of you are, and this ain't going away.
You know what?
So I can give you the. You want send the 5K?
Here's what you need to do. You need to go and
don't tell me what to do. I know what to do, and I'm doing it.
You're looking for money. Get $100,000 or whatever the what do you call it? Whatever the reward is. It isn't me. You have got the wrong person. That's why I said ask your friends, your brother.
You're Donna Adelson.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Well, I know. We know who's involved in all this.
Yeah, this is not making any sense. I mean, if you want the money, you should get it from the police. They can give you a whole lot more than you're asking me for money for someone. I can't. I can't do this. I have had too much stress and too much aggravation from this, and I don't know what you are talking about. I just don't know.
Really, I think you should talk to Katie. Talk to people that are involved in this. You'll know. You know who it is. You know what's going on.
That's why I'm calling
you can tell me,
you back.
Senora Adelson, you can tell me all you fucking want, but I know you know. Because I heard when I was locked up in Broward with my brother Tato, he told me everything. He told me everything.
Well, then
I just wanted to take care of him because fucking Katie was being taken care of with her fucking puto.
I just think instead of asking me, you should get the money from the police. There's a lot of money out there, and I know if you think you know who this is, then go ahead and do it, because I know it isn't me. I know it isn't me, and I can't take this kind of level of stress. I just can't. I know I didn't do anything.
Just talk to people. You talk to the right people. You talk to people. You make this 5K come to me. That's all I need. Just do it and get it to me. Do it and get it to me.
I'll call you back.
Wow. So if Donna did know something, she wasn't giving it up. It didn't matter, though. The investigators knew all they needed to know.
Yeah, and it was Tuesday, May 24th, when FBI agents attempted to make their first contact in person. The FBI were sent out to two places, the townhouse where Sigfredo and Katie lived with their two kids, and Sigfredo's workplace, Rapid Capital Funding. Yeah, he actually had a job at this point. Katie was home, but when she saw who was outside, she hid. She didn't come to the door. Katie tried calling Sigfredo, but he wasn't answering because at that same moment, he was confronted by the FBI agents, who were asking if he knew Luis Rivera. Sigfredo denied knowing why they were there, even when they informed him that they had information that he was involved in something that occurred back in 2014 in Tallahassee. He said he's never been to Tallahassee and he doesn't know what they're talking about. The more they pressed him, asking him things like if he knew Dan Markel or if he knew Tato, the more defensive he got. Sigfredo even told the FBI agents that they were going to have to speak to his attorney. At the same time, a coworker and friend of Sigfredo's named Mike Perez picked up his cell phone and called Katie to inform her what was going on. He told Katie he thinks that the feds are there talking to Sigfredo about some kind of crime involving Tato. What Katie didn't know is that her townhouse was actually tapped, and the investigators could listen to everything she was saying. She asked Mike if he would be willing to drive to her townhouse to see who was outside her door. He did, and he informed her that it was probably FBI agents. Finally, the FBI left both locations, and that's when Sigfredo called Katie. They were being recorded.
Katie, of course, wanted to know what in the world was going on, and Sigfredo told her not to worry, that these people can't just come inside. They needed to have a warrant. But guess what? They started to pack up all their belongings, and Sigfredo went to Walmart and purchased 2 burner phones, and they stopped using their old numbers, and then they left the house. The next day, on Wednesday, May 25th, Sigfredo made his way back to the townhouse to pack up even more things, and Katie and the children had fled to her brother's house, where they were hiding out. When Sigfredo was done packing up everything, he planned to meet her over there. But when he stopped at a gas station in Hollandale, a bunch of FBI agents surrounded his vehicle and pointed guns at him. He had no way out. 34-year-old Sigfredo Garcia was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and possession of cocaine since they found some on him when they searched him. He was brought to the Broward County Jail. Here's his mugshot that made its rounds the next day in the news. One down, more to go. And this video has been a long one, long enough, though I really do wish we could wrap all of it up for you. But there's actually more to come. I think we're going to wrap up in the next one. I think there's going to be one more video, and then we can move on to the next case we're going to do, because that's a pretty insane one.
It is.
So thank you so much for watching.
And please don't forget to subscribe. And thank you for all who already have.
We will see you in our next video. Bye.